Spiders. Of course, it would be spiders. The room looked to have a high ceiling, maybe 20 feet. The strands dominated the long room, making seeing to the other side difficult. The webbing also created lots of shadows and corners for spiders to hide in. Other than the sticky-looking webs vibrating slightly, I could not see a single spider. Maveth also confirmed, but had bad news with his observation. I cannot see any movement but the thickness of the strands. He paused. They have to be very large spiders. Shit! That did not even occur to me. The glistening strands were as thick as my wrist. Maybe we should try the other corridor, I offered to the Goliath. Maveth sucked on his teeth. His lips were still purple from the blueberries. This is the third room we have not entered. Fourth, if you add the dark room, he said slowly in consideration. We cannot avoid every room, Eric. Spiders are not too difficult. We will check the last corridor first, I said as a compromise. Then try one of the rooms. We returned to the Y intersection and followed the other corridor. Maveth immediately got excited as we approached the end of the corridor. I was focused on the thick, black, oily pools scattered through a long, wide room. The reflecting river of light from the ceiling made the pools seem to move. Maveth's excitement was due to the gold statue at the room's far end. I don't think the dungeon could have been more obvious that it was a trap. My eyes focused on the statue, an elf wielding a sword. The statue was gold, and there were no monsters in sight. It would be easy to get close, move it into my dimensional space, and leave. This was probably a safe room, too. That made sense, as only a safe room would have a golden statue. Maveth bumped me as he stepped past into the room. My eyes looked up at the Goliath to yell at him for trying to get to the statue first. As soon as my focus left the statue, a fog lifted from my mind. I grabbed the back of Maveth's leather armor and yanked him hard, pulling him out of the room. He had only taken a single step inside, and I was fortunate he had not expected my yank. Unfortunately, he stepped back onto my boot, which caused me to fall backward, followed by Maveth. Having a large, odorous Goliath fall on top of you is unpleasant. His weight knocked the air from me, and I was pressed into the floor uncomfortably. Maveth, I grunted, it is a trap. The statue is affecting your mind. Do not look. When Maveth removed his considerable weight from me, I focused on the chamber floor, healing my knee that had been strained from his weight. The oil slicks on the floor were stretching toward us in amorphous limbs. They reached the archway to the room and flattened against an invisible barrier, unable to leave. What the hell is that? I reminded Maveth, do not look at the statue. If I had been alone, I might have walked into the room oblivious to the danger. Maveth shielded his eyes to just look down at the roiling black ooze. I do not know. Maybe an ooze. Never heard of a black ooze before. The black elastic mass gave up trying to pass into the corridor and returned to its puddle further in the chamber. I counted 7 of the creatures, and 2 attacked Maveth as soon as he had entered. I recalled my time in the sewers of Makkah. Are they the same thing as slimes? We saw those in the sewers of Makkah. Maveth shook his head, turning away from the room. Slimes are harmless in comparison to oozes. Oozes move faster, and once they grapple you, they climb over your body and force themselves into every orifice on your body. Then they digest you for the inside out. Imagining dying that way was not pleasant. I think we will not enter this room either. Spider room? I asked the gray-skinned man, and he gave a curt nod. We quickly returned to the last room. Nothing had changed in the 15 minutes we had been gone. We both stood there, and I considered all the rooms we had encountered so far. Every room was extremely dangerous for the unsuspecting dungeon delver. I was beginning to have doubts about our survivability. It only took one mistake, and it would be the end for us. I took out an apple and tried to throw it into the room. When it passed the archway, it fell rapidly to the stone floor and rolled a few feet, touching the anchor point of one of the strands. All the strands vibrated slightly quicker before settling. Maveth was staring at the apple. I explained, "You cannot make attacks unless you are in the room, and the dungeon creatures cannot leave the room. But do not hold me to that. I know truly little about dungeons. You have killed every dungeon creature you have fought," Maveth said supportively. "I am glad it is you that I am trapped with." I winced as trapped seemed like the correct word, and I felt guilty that I was thinking of Maveth as my taste tester for dungeon produce. I have been in a dungeon room once where the exit was sealed behind me. Maveth, I do not know if we should enter this room without knowing what we are facing, I said. I was wishing I still had that goblin. I did have another living creature in my dimensional storage, the elf griffin rider. I knew she was still alive, but on the brink of death. For the first time, I thought about possibly healing her and trying to convince her to help. Of course, she was likely to try to kill me first, and then Maveth would also know how powerful my dimensional space was. I will go first and draw out the spiders, Maveth said, gripping the handle of his hammer tightly. Before I could change his mind, he entered the room, and nothing happened. The massive Goliath slowly scanned the maze of webbing. We could not see to the far side of the chamber. Maveth stepped forward and grasped the apple on the floor while remaining alert. He tugged on it, and the skin of the apple peeled off, remaining on the sticky strand. The network of strands started to dance. Maveth was frantically searching for the spiders, as was I. A loud snap, and one of the strands lashed toward Maveth. He dodged to his right only to step into another. It stuck to his arm, hampering his movement. The left wall started to move, and quickly became recognizable as a massive gray spider, its body larger than a horse. The spider's body shifted rapidly from the dark gray stone of the wall to an ominous black as it scuttled toward Maveth. The spider seemed too big for this room as Maveth attempted to free himself. Clicking sounds as the spider's legs cadenced on the stone drew my attention from scanning the rest of the room. I did not see any other movement, and was hoping this was the only spider. I stepped into the room and removed the spider's head before it could get close to Maveth. I could not risk Maveth getting poisoned and being incapacitated. My ether had bottomed out, but the spider's resistance was not severe. The spider collapsed, and blue viscous blood oozed out of its missing head. Maveth grunted, trying to free his arm, but he clearly noticed the dying spider that was just 10 feet from him. The legs were twitching as it leaked a puddle on the floor. I used the elven runic dagger to cut Maveth free easily. He was clearly speechless from the demonstration of my power. "Anything useful to harvest on the spider?" I asked the Goliath casually. "Eric, did you?" "How can you?" he stuttered to find the words. "I gave him time to puzzle everything and got to work." I pulled the essence collector out from the minimal pack I was carrying. I approached the spider to a dumbfounded Maveth and used the collector. The dense, blue smoke rapidly formed a glossy black apex essence, neither channeling. Maveth was still stunned, so I started looking for the reward chest. Of course, it was barely visible through the maze of crisscrossing webbing. I used the elven dagger to cut away strands. When it contacted the strands, it reminded me of a hot knife touching plastic, easily burning through. The room was about 30 by 60, and I was confused. Every dungeon room I had ever been in had something for the creature to eat. As I cleared this room to reach the chest, there was nothing but webbing. The chest was large, 3 feet long, but still solid stone. Once again, I shattered it with the pommel of the dagger, eagerly anticipating the loot. I could see how the danger and lure of treasure could be appealing. A shiny short sword sat among the silver coins. The hilt was designed in the image of a spider with the legs splaying out to make the guard, and all along the blade were little etchings of spiders. It looked like they had hatched at the hilt and run down both sides of the 24-inch blade. 20 silver coins, Maveth, and a dungeon blade. I stood and turned to face my companion, who was still processing what had just happened. "Maveth, is there anything we can harvest from the spider?" I repeated my question. Maveth tore his eyes from me to look at it. "It is a gargantuan spider, non-poisonous, so no venom sacs." He stared back at it, realizing the fangs were gone with the head. "The spinnerets, but I am not familiar with harvesting them." I shrugged. Delmar had harvested the spinnerets in my first dungeon. "Eric, do you have void magic?" Maveth's deep voice questioned me. "Would that be a problem?" I asked, neither confirming nor denying. Void magic seemed to be what people thought my power came from after seeing it. Maveth seemed to consider. "Void mages are regulated just as much as necromancers," he stated, not answering my question. "I think all void mages in the Tellian Empire need to be in service to the Emperor." "Well, can you keep my secret?" I asked, still not offering him the complete truth. "I am not Tellian," the large man stated. I nodded, thinking that was the best I was going to get from him. I can only do this once. I pointed at the spider. It takes me about 2 hours to recover enough aether to do it again. Maybe I was giving him too much information, but we were going to be fighting together for a time in this dungeon. Maveth's mind was still turning. Is that how you killed the female manticore? His eyes suddenly went wide in the wyvern. It had only taken Maveth minutes to piece everything together. Yes. Do you want this short sword? I held up the spider-themed weapon. What do you think the spider was eating to stay alive? Maveth's focus gradually came back to the conversation. Gargantuan spiders can hibernate for years. If there are any egg sacs here, we should destroy them. This one was just an adolescent. They can get much larger after years of molting. We searched the room but did not find any egg sacs or molted exoskeletons. The room also had no exits. It looked like we were not going to solve the mystery of the spider chamber. I sent the spider blade to my dimensional space after Maveth declined it. I was a little unhappy that Maveth appeared more wary about me as we left. We should rest. We can head back to the safe room where we entered, I suggested. We can stop and collect more blueberries. Maveth nodded, licking his lips. 2 elven children were seated among the bushes as we approached the room. The shapeshifters had been revived. It had been over a day since we had killed them. Maveth, I still need about an hour before I can do my trick again. The 2 elves walked to the entrance, the girl's eyes narrowing at me accusatorily. Looks like they are back to play again. I was completely taken off guard. Wait, you remember us? The elf girl was speaking Latin. Many thoughts raced through my mind, and none of them were pleasant. Maveth, I don't know about this. If they remember us each time, Maveth did not seem as intimidated by the shapeshingers as I was. I am healed this time. I can manage one by myself, he declared confidently, his voice echoing in the hall. In a blink, the boy's eyes turned yellow and stayed that way. He flashed Maveth a toothy smile. The big one thinks he can beat me again. His skin stretched, and his clothing ripped as he grew to full height. He did not resemble the creature we fought before, but instead was a mirror image of Maveth, albeit nude and immodest. Maveth suddenly looked uncomfortable, his hands clenching around the handle of his hammer. I do not know about this, Eric. Perhaps we should try the vine room next. His voice was now uncertain as he faced himself as an opponent. My focus remained on the creatures. I worried that these 2 could continuously learn from us, preparing better to fight us each time until we eventually lost. I had an unusual thought. Maybe they would not tell the truth, but perhaps they could share something about the dungeon. I recalled something the girl had said. You lied. There was no treasure in the dark room. I never entered that room. But she did not know that. The creepy elf girl's face twisted into a horrid sneer. We do not lie, she pointed at me. Oh, did you not bring your mining pick? Her tone was mocking. Maveth's unease at seeing himself did not prevent his curiosity from shining through in the conversation. Mining pick. Kick? You travel this deep into the labyrinth and come unprepared. The girl laughed unnaturally, openly taunting us. I grasped at the thread in her words. Deep? Where are we in the labyrinth? Are there levels? The other Maveth returned to being an elf boy. Do not tell them anything. Make them pay for the knowledge, he told the girl. The girl nodded energetically at her companion. We want the red apples. I am sick of the berries. I am sick of the berries. Bring us 20 apples, and we will tell you where you are. Maveth was about to say something, but I raised my hand to negotiate. 20 apples is a lot, and the bear does not like to give them away without a fight. 5 questions, and 5 apples for each answer. If I do not like the completeness of the answer, no apples. The boy turned to the girl, and they deliberated. He is trying to trick us. He will give us the apples and then steal them back after killing us again. You could always let us pass without fighting. I offered, interrupting them. Those are not the rules. Break the rules, and we will never be made whole again, the girl said angrily. I produced 5 apples in my hands to entice them. Then eat them after you answer my question. They looked at each other and then back at me. The girl's eyes locked on the apples, desire clear. You are near the bottom of the labyrinth, but not at the bottom, she blurted. That was a cryptic answer. What did it mean to be near the bottom? We just entered the labyrinth in the room down that corridor. I pointed down the corridor we had arrived in. They are lost. They know not where they are. The girl danced, mocking me. No more questions until the apples are received. I felt I had not received a complete answer, but it was best to build trust. I rolled the 5 apples into the room and they snatched them suspiciously. "Think they are poisoned?" the girl asked the boy. "If they are, then it is a good trick on us," he replied, his teeth becoming needle-like as he devoured the first apple, noisily chewing and savoring the flesh. The girl, not to be outdone, also grew sharp teeth to attack her own apple. The 5 apples did not last long. Juices dribbled down their bodies in a gross display of gluttony. Seeing how much they enjoyed them, I produced 5 more. Next question. How big is the shimmering labyrinth? I hope to get a clearer idea so that maybe being near the bottom would make more sense. The girl said, "It has been too long since we wandered the dungeon. It is wider than you think and deeper too," the boy added. "It continues to grow, so you never know how big it is. Now, the apples?" His greedy eyes focused on them. I frowned at their vague answer. "You did not answer my question to my satisfaction. No apples." The boy rasped out angrily. "I told you we shouldn't trust them." He fumed before calming down and trying to offer a better answer. "When we wandered the dungeon, there were hundreds of rooms. Right, left, straight down, and all around. We ended up here eventually. Trapped." Mavis' deep voice reminded me he was behind me. "The dungeon did not create you?" The girl was frustrated. "Another question?" "No apples for the last. They are tricking us." To mollify the girl, I rolled the apples into the room again. The grotesque display of their consumption happened once more. When they finished, I pointed at Mavis. "Answer his question next." The shapeshangers looked uncertainly at each other. The boy finally answered. "We entered with the elves in the guise of one of their number." The boy shifted into an adult elf. "They discovered our true nature, and we killed them but could not escape the dungeon." The girl shifted into an adult as well. "We died elsewhere but woke, trapped in this room, never able to leave, bound for eternity to the cursed dungeon, forced to kill interlopers. My body trembled at the thought of being cursed to live forever in a single dungeon room. I was sure I had new ammunition for nightmares." I absently rolled the apples forward, thinking. Maviath asked another question while I pondered, his voice uncertain. "Are the creatures stronger the deeper in the dungeon you go?" The woman wiped sugary drool from her mouth. "Of course. Foolish question. And now you owe us more apples." "Mavis, it was a good question," I reassured him. It meant that the rooms we were exploring were much more dangerous than those higher up in the dungeon. It gave me hope that some of the company might have survived. I gave them their prize, and the adult elf male smiled with his needle-like teeth. "You have but one question left." "But I have more than just 5 apples left," I returned his toothy smile. The woman answered, holding her stomach. "I am full and no longer desire apples." "We will answer your last question as agreed." "Mavis, let me think. I warned the Goliath." If we only had one question left, I wanted to make it count. Maybe the shape-changers could be reasoned with again for more answers. I finally asked, "Can we rest safely in the corridors between the rooms?" The male laughed disgustingly at the question. "They enter a dungeon and do not know the rules. Foolish human and large gray man." The woman joined him in mocking us. But they were the real fools here, having been trapped. Still, I wanted an answer. The pair calmed down, reverting to their child forms. The girl answered, still giggling at our lack of knowledge. "Only restrooms are safe. If you rest in the passages," she locked eyes with me, "and stop making progress, then we will be free to come and find you." The girl licked her lips, and I shivered. I gave them their apples. "Would you be interested in some fish for more answers?" I offered. Their greedy eyes focused on the fillet I produced. The ceiling of the shapeshifter's chamber changed to a flashing red pattern. They looked up, worried expressions on their faces. "We have completed the bargain, and it looks like another bargain will not be struck," the boy said. Did that mean the dungeon was watching us? Still, I felt the answers we had gotten were worth the fish. I tossed it into the room to their surprise. The 2 elf children fought over it like quarreling siblings, shoveling chunks of torn raw fish into their mouths and trying to deny the other a bite. The brief fight was violent, and the 2 were bleeding from minor scratches at the end. The girl addressed us when the fish was gone, shreds of fish stuck in her needle teeth. Flesh is so much better than apples. Maybe it is time you come in and play with us so we can taste yours? The ceiling faded from the red shimmering to return to normal. It appeared the dungeon had warned the shapeshifters of their behavior. Maevith, we need to get back to the safe room to rest, agreed. His deep voice echoed reassuringly behind me. I will take the boy. I am ready when you are. Can you two back up to the center of the room again? I asked the shape-changers. They started to shake their heads, no, malicious smiles on their faces in anticipation. I gave you the fish without compensation, I told them. Reluctantly, the two children started walking backward toward the center of the room, conceding that the fish had been worth this small compromise. Maevith and I entered the room, but the children morphed into their large, monstrous bodies and did not rush to attack this time. Maevith swung his hammer lightly in his grip. My black blade and round shield were ready for an attack, but it never came. The two of them were studying us, trying to learn from us. I took a step toward the corridor to the safe room. If we did not have to fight them, all the better. My action caused the creatures to sprint toward us. I took the closer one's head, causing the other one to try to flee in surprise. Maevith was not having it, though. He thrust the head of his hammer into its face. Facial bones audibly cracked as its face compressed. The strike stunned the creature as Maevith's strength was on display. I circled behind the dazed creature and targeted its hamstring, opening a gash and cutting deeply into the muscle. With no mouth, the creature could not scream. It gained enough awareness to pivot and try to backhand me with its powerful arms. I had already retreated, and Maevith's hammer was on a downswing. He missed the top of its head but caught its neck and shoulder. The head of the hammer embedded 4 inches deep in the grotesque figure, and a loud crack could be heard from the snapping of bone, forcing it to its knees. I did not hesitate to step forward and behead it. We were both breathing heavily from the adrenaline and nodded to each other. It had been easier than expected, and we both came out unharmed. Maevith collect the blueberries, and I will help after checking the chest. The chest was in the same location as the first time, nestled in one of the blueberry bushes. It had 36 large silver coins, and again, another apex essence. The color was different this time, and it was light yellow in essence of insight. Was this a joke by the dungeon after we gained some knowledge from the shapeshifters? I used the essence collector on the shapeshifters, but was saddened to see they both yielded just a major essence with the same shifting colors, though it was still a boon. Mental essences seemed to be less common than physical ones. The first time, they had yielded apex essences. Maybe it was because we had killed them so quickly after the first time. What were these dungeon rules they mentioned? I started helping Maevith harvest the berries. Maevith, what essence do you want? I have a few magical essences, the minor essence of quickness and an apex essence of insight. Quickness, he said immediately. Being faster than your opponent is the best way to win a fight, he stated confidently. I handed him the small green sphere as soon as my aether recovered enough to retrieve it. I also stored everything in my space. Maevith stated the obvious. After we rest in the safe room, we will have to fight them again to explore the dungeon. I know. I figured eventually the shapeshifters would find a way to make the fight more even if they recalled each fight. We finished with the berries and I relieved myself in the room. Having such a large bowel movement after so long was an odd feeling. I had a few wax leaves to clean up, but I wished I had more. I left the head of the shapeshifter on the mossy floor. On a whim, I tried to use the collector on it. It pulled no essence from the head, which was slightly disappointing. I walked with Maevith back to the first room we entered. The familiar elven script was on the wall. The floor of the room where we had defecated was clean. The dungeon was cleaning up after us. The exit was still here, mocking us with a false offer of freedom. Maybe we could exit and enter before the specters swarmed us. It was a thought, but it was best to wait, as the summoner was still out there. And it had only been 2 days. We were exhausted, and while Maevith prepared dinner, I set up our bedrolls. I figured it had been over a day since my last essence, and I assumed the glossy black apex essence would enhance my aether channeling. It worked quickly, giving me an intense awareness of the ether around me. The dungeon almost felt like it was forged from pure essence before the feeling vanished. Maevith grumbled. If we had a large pot, I could make 1 large batch of appleberry jam. I surprised Maveth again by taking out the cast iron cauldron I had taken from a Legion hall long ago. The thing must weigh 70 pounds with the lid, and I took it to use as an improvised weapon, not for its intended purpose. Maveth shook his head in disbelief. "What else do you have in there, Eric?" I mumbled. "This and that," but did not specify. Maveth shrugged, accepting, and took the pot to work on his jam. Maveth started talking as he worked. "It is too bad we got separated from Brutus and the scholar. Their help would have been most welcome. Just the two of us are going to have a challenging time working through the rooms down here and finding the others." Maveth was stewing blueberries and apples together, making jam. He was also doing his best to make use of the last bits of the rations from the elven packs. Now that we knew we had food sources, we could be more liberal with our meals to restore our bodies. The faster, the better. After much internal deliberation, I finally revealed something to Maveth. "You know, Maveth, I may know someone who could help. Not sure if she would be too willing, though." Maveth's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Who?" Maveth's question hung in the air. Who? It was not a simple question for me to answer. I was going to have to reveal to him that it was not void magic that helped me kill the monsters. I probably should have prepared him better for this and taken the decisive step of trusting the Goliath earlier. You know how you thought I had powerful void magic. Well, I do not have any void magic. I can remove part of a creature by placing it in my dimensional space. Maveth's face was an unreadable mask, as the large iron pot bubbled in front of him, giving the air a fruity scent reminiscent of candy. "Maveth!" I tried to get the attention of the Goliath, who was still processing my words. Minutes passed before he began to stir the syrupy hot jam. "I do not know much about magic," he finally said. "But your statement seems too fantastical." Okay, I was never going to tell Maveth I was an otherworlder. He seemed a bit broken, struggling to fathom the extent and power of my spell form. I opened my dimensional space and rearranged it slightly to make the elven tablet reader appear next to him. It was 7 feet away from me. Maveth jumped a little but eyed me slowly, putting the pieces together. A prolonged silence followed as he stirred the pot. Every once in a while, he would look at me or the table. He finally said, "So if you can pull a part of a monster into your dimensional space, can you pull an entire monster or person into it?" I nodded and confirmed. "Yes." I let Maveth think for a moment before he asked, "Could you put me in your dimensional space?" "Probably. If you were sitting down," I said, cracking a grin. I partly wanted him to think the space was smaller than it actually was, and it was also just a jab at his immense size. "So, who is in there now?" Maveth finally asked, moving the cauldron off the thermal stone. I winced slightly, having to tell this story. Back in Makkah, when the Barteradians attacked, their griffin riders crashed into the city. I was sent with some of the company to make sure they were dead. "She has been in there the entire time," Maveth exclaimed. I winced. "Well, no. I put her in there when she was casting a fireball at me. I released her and the fireball at an enemy a few days later. I thought the explosion had killed her," I explained. Maveth shook his head, interrupting me. "That is not how magic works. You can't steal another's magic and store it." "Really?" I asked, confused. "That was how it happened." Maveth seemed uncertain. "I do not know. I just have never heard of anyone doing that. So she is in there now, burned and suffering." "Burned and suffering. Time does not pass in my dimensional space," I reminded him, and he nodded. "Actually, I left her in Makkah, and she was healed by her people. Then fate brought her into my path again. She was with the summoner's student when we caught up to them. Sebastian's drake crushed her in his jaws and slammed her into a rock. I put her in my space to save her for later." That sounded just as bad coming out of my mouth as Maveth's face scrunched in disgust. I tried to explain quickly. I intended to use the collector on her. Constantine and Sebastian were close, so I could not reveal the collector. I learned that if I store dead bodies, I can get the essence later. Maveth seemed somewhat placated, and I wondered just what he thought of me. He asked, "How do you know she is alive?" My aether bottomed out. "She resisted being placed in the dimensional space. That means her ether core is still active. At least, that is my guess," I told him truthfully. Maveth nodded, and we started to eat. We dipped everything in the hot jam before it gelled. As we finished off the loose rations, Maveth asked another question. How is the mostly dead elf going to help us? Do you have another healing potion? I dipped some jerky in the fruit sauce and savored it while chewing. No, I do not. No? I was hoping to find another healing potion, but you can see why I am hesitant to bring her out. She is not going to be very happy with me. I would not be very happy with you either, Maveth said, chewing on some hard cheese. Is she a good fighter? I thought back to our encounters. She was good with her blades, and had magic that could easily be turned against me. I suddenly recalled being fireballed in the back and reconsidered this idea. Yes, she can fight and cast fireballs, Maveth seemed to consider. Perhaps it is best if I try to reason with her when you release her from your imprisonment. It appeared Maveth had already decided it was a good idea. I sipped some wine from the bottle. Maveth, that is a pretty harsh way to describe it. You placed her there against her will and held her without a chance of freedom. That describes it aptly. His deep voice carried strong disapproval. Then I remembered the orc slavers had killed his sister, and I was sort of enslaving the elf. I could have let her die. I countered his disapproval. He seemed to ponder this for a long time. Sorry for being upset. You were enemies. You did nothing wrong. And now you plan to save her to make amends. The tension in the room lessened greatly. Soon we were making our way to sleep. I held the amulet in my hand, needing to reference the books Castile had created in the dreamscape. Maveth, the amulet is in this hand. If you need to wake me, just take it. Maveth's eyes studied the amulet. Can I? Next time we sleep, I confirmed. I entered the dreamscape. Searching through Castile's books proved extremely useful, as one of the books was on arcane scripts from dungeons. The other potion I received from the Red Bear was an ether restorative potion. I knew these potions were extremely rare and valuable since alchemists had trouble brewing stable versions of them. Even the simplest ether restorative required a Tier 3 alchemist. It took time to find a reference table for essences. The book contained a whole section on the history of the collectors. The first collector was found in a dungeon thousands of years ago, and they were extremely rare. The First Legion saw the immense value in them and focused on recreating the devices with their artificers. They produced hundreds of them, but the master artificers capable of crafting them were assassinated in subsequent wars. Thus, the number of collectors became limited and rarely found in dungeons. I matched up the essences with the chart to see what I had in my storage. Minor essence with azure, blue with white swirls air affinity apex essence with azure. Blue with white swirls air affinity 13. Minor essences with dark green quickness. Attribute 2 apex essences with rainbow swirling colors, illusion affinity. 2 major essences with rainbow swirling colors, illusion. Affinity, apex essence with black with swirling red and orange fire. Affinity apex, essence with pale yellow insight. Attribute based on the information found in the book. I could consume 1 physical, 1 mental, and 1 magical essence together without fear of harming myself. However, if I wanted to consume more in the same day, they would need to be the same types. If I consumed a strength essence the first time, I would need to stick with strength in the physical stats until I let a day pass to change the type. I was still a bit skeptical, and would need to do my own testing. Maybe being an otherworlder made me different somehow. I had compiled quite a collection of essences in the dungeon in a short time. I was eyeing the minor air affinity essence. When I took the apex earth essence, I had 0 affinity, and it was painful to add the new affinity to my either core. Maybe the minor air essence would not be as horrific. Castile left a lot of books, but I focused my time in the dreamscape on learning the runic script. It was a headache since it was essentially memorizing over 700 symbols and their rough meanings, which only became clear when you chained them together. The patterns were intricate as well. Fortunately, most potions required only a sequence of 3 symbols to identify the contents. Within the symbols, I could also see many geometric patterns in the spell forms I had imprinted on my core. Dungeon script was the language of magic. I was not going to be able to draw the symbols, but I could at least study them to recognize them. I created flashcards and worked for almost 8 hours. I cleaned up the dreamscape, moving everything to the scorpion room and sealing it away. Maveth was going to use the device next, and my level of trust with him was reaching a point where I would let him use it without my presence. I left the dreamscape to find Maveth already awake. He seemed in a cheerful mood. I used the reader. "Can you read it to me?" he asked. I moved the reader and tried to teach Maveth the elven numerical symbols as I read them off. Fortunately, they were in base 10 as well. As expected, his magical affinities had not changed, and his potentials remained the same. "This is great. It looks like your body is recovering after being starved for so long." It had only been just over a day and a few meals, but Maveth's physical stats were rising rapidly. I figured mine would be doing the same. He paid close attention to the numerical symbols, and I thought he would be able to read it on his own next time. I stood and started to help with the cleanup. I was not going to use the reader as he might want to know what mine were, and my magic affinities needed to remain secret for now. We had almost 5 gallons of jam. I'd just moved the entire cauldron to my dimensional space to store the appleberry jam. I placed almost everything in my space, leaving us both with small packs of items we needed for quick access. I felt the most well-rested and satiated I had been in weeks. It felt strange because I was trapped deep in an extremely dangerous dungeon. We walked to the chamber with the shapeshifters, and I felt great relief wash over me as they were nowhere in sight. "How long has it been since we killed them?" I asked Maveth. Maveth was still scanning the room. "Just over half a day. They are shapeshifters, though. They may be hiding as something else. They can do that." I also searched my memory, trying to identify anything that seemed out of place. "I do not know. But anything seems possible, after what you told me yesterday." His voice echoed in the room. We studied the area for 15 minutes before stepping in, and nothing happened. The bodies of the shapeshifters had not vanished and were just over the rise in the moss, already desiccated. The bushes were full of tiny berries, replacing what we had harvested. We quickly refilled the water barrel and moved into the corridor toward the fire bear. Oddly, I was disappointed not to have the chance to talk with the shapeshifters again. They had given us valuable information, and I hoped to tease out more knowledge, even if the dungeon did not want them to cooperate. We would see them again if we had to return to the safe room. The fire bear was eating apples off the tree when we approached. Maveth was already excited. Maveth was already excited. Such a majestic creature. The fur would make a spectacular cloak, and that was some of the best bear meat I have ever eaten. The fire bear was eyeing us, but not overly concerned. I studied it for a long time. It looked smaller. Actually, I am sure. The last one was larger. Maybe it is not the same one? That would be different from when the dungeon revives the shapeshifters. Do not damage the pelt. I want it in one piece. Maveth's eagerness was more focused on harvesting the bear than my suppositions about how the dungeon worked. "Wait here." I stepped into the room, immediately drawing the shimmering red bear's attention. It cocked its head, its eyes becoming a deeper red as it charged. I removed most of its brain from 15 feet away, and sidestepped as the body slid forward on the soft earth. Maveth stepped into the room, his jaw open. He walked to the bear that was spilling blood steadily onto the ground. Seeing he could not speak, I told him, "You can start harvesting the bear. I will check the reward chest." I pointed to the stone chest atop the mound. A moment later, I was shattering the thin stone casing, and was relieved to see the 2 familiar potions among the silver coins, the ether restorative and the greater healing potion. Maveth found his voice after being stunned at my display. "Eric, come over here, and I will show you the proper way to harvest a bear." I sighed, gathering up the coins and potions to join Maveth. I would send them to my dimensional space when my ether sufficiently recovered. With the healing potion, releasing the Griffin Rider was a viable option now. Maveth was excited when I removed the collector and brain from my inventory, stating that it would be useful for tanning the hide. I helped him prepare the bear after harvesting its essence. It was a major essence for fire affinity, a downgrade from the apex fire essence I had gotten from the first fire bear. He was meticulous in his harvest, not wanting to waste anything, and I learned a lot from him about processing a kill. He must have asked me every 5 minutes if my dimensional space could hold everything. After stripping the pelt, he did his best to stretch it on an apple tree. As soon as the stakes were cut, I sent them to my dimensional space to preserve them. We should only spend half a day harvesting the bear before leaving the room, I suggested after a few hours. Maveth considered this and nodded. If the shapeshifters do not reappear after half a day, then I think that is wise. Where are we going from here? To the vine room, I think. It seems the safest option to explore. I revealed my thoughts, and Maveth nodded. As we processed the bear, we were getting 3 weeks' worth of meat from this one kill for the 2 of us. I decided Maveth could have the organs when we cook. I never got used to the chewiness of heart muscle, the chalky richness of liver, or the off-taste of kidneys. Maybe if I were still starving I would try it, but with all the steaks, it was a hard pass for me. We collected apples as well, maybe 200. Before leaving, we munched on apples as we walked out of the room. Between bites, I told Maveth, there was a healing potion in the reward chest. But I am not planning to use it on the Griffin Rider just yet. If you are injured again, I would rather have it for you. Maveth finished his apple core, and all. Good. I will try not to get injured again then. I just chuckled at his logic. Maybe there will be another healing potion next time we harvest the fire bear. The loot chest was exactly the same as the first time, I said as we approached the vine room. The room looked the same. 3 alcoves were covered in thick vines with bright red flowers and yellow veins. There were no signs of an exit. I will go in and retreat if needed. Stay here. I stepped into the room and was slightly upset when nothing happened. With a second step, I noticed a fragrant scent filling the air, probably coming from the flowers. I took another step into the room, eyeing the vines, and prepared an air shield. My breathing became slightly strained after a minute, so I sent healing ether to my lungs, planning to run. I did not detect any damage to them. Then my eyelids started to feel heavy. I stumbled backward, slightly unsteady on my feet. All I wanted to do was lie down and fall asleep. I stumbled into Maveth in the corridor and he supported me, worry on his face. "What is wrong, Eric?" He shook me a little, my armor rattling from the force. "Where is the healing potion?" He was getting panicky, but my mind was foggy, and I closed my eyes to sleep. Water splashed on my face, and I woke up sputtering. A relieved Maveth stood over me. "I was praying to Pluto for you, Eric. You were unconscious for almost an hour." I shook my head, my thoughts quickly clearing. "I think the pollen from the red flowers puts you to sleep." I checked my body. "I am not injured, and I am breathing fine." I sat up and noticed Maveth had dragged me about 50 feet from the entrance. My eyes had to do a double take at what I saw. The vines from the vine room were 20 feet down the corridor, covering every wall. Maveth answered, "They do not move fast, but after you left, the vines stirred and followed you out of the room." I thought creatures could not leave the rooms. I hypothesized, I think the dungeon lets the creatures pursue us once we enter a room. It is the only thing that makes sense. I reconsidered. Maybe plants can just leave rooms. I don't know. I remembered that when I released the goblin, the bear did not pursue it down the corridor it fled into. I was frustrated with not knowing the dungeon rules. Then again, maybe each dungeon had different rules. It would make sense since the entry criteria for this dungeon was different from the entry criteria of the other dungeon I had encountered when I received the Dreamscape amulet. "The vines are slowly retreating," Maveth noted, and I focused on them. It was hard to discern movement with the flowing, hypnotic lights on the floor and ceiling, but I think he was correct. Perhaps the vines could pursue me because I was unconscious and vulnerable. I told Maveth what I learned from the room. The room had a sickly sweet scent. I think it is from the flower pollen. My lungs burned for a moment, and then I got really sleepy and could not help but fall asleep. Maveth's deep voice intoned, "A really vile trap. The vines probably pull you into an alcove to digest your corpse." I heard of such plants in the jungles on the southern part of the continent. I nodded, standing, and thought I had a bestiary in my book collection in my dreamscape. Most were in Elven script that would take me days to translate. Singa had some jungles, and I remembered paging through the local threats in case someone questioned me. I had skimmed over the flora, and did not recall these particular vines. Next time I was in the dreamscape, I would try to find out what the vines were. I gave Maveth the unwelcome news. It looks like our only option is the room with the cockatrices. Maveth's large body recoiled when I said it. We had not explored only 3 rooms. The gold statue room with the black oozes, the dark room that the shapeshifters said we needed a mining pick for, and the massive cockatrice room with the waterfall. Eric, I do not know, Maveth hedged, still fearful of the oversized chickens. I will come up with a plan. For now, let us sit outside the bear room and watch it until the fire bear respawns. I want to see it with my own eyes, I informed Maveth. He nodded happily, delaying our trip to the cockatrice chamber. We started to prepare a big meal, cooking in the corridor with one of us watching the den entrance. While Maveth was on watch, I slipped into the dreamscape and quickly located an entry for the vines in the Singa book. The sleeper vine is easily spotted from a distance by its bright flowers with veins of white or yellow. The flowers give off a sickly sweet scent that lulls the unsuspecting creature to sleep for up to 3 hours. Once the creature falls asleep, the vines drag it into their maw and restrain it with layers of vines. Thick thorns pierce the flesh and inject digestive acid. When the prey wakes, they have awareness but feel no pain as their body is metabolized over the course of 2 days. Repeated exposure to the pollen of the sleeper vine allows one to build up immunity. The beast tribes of Quinonqua expose their children to the flowers early so they can resist the effects. There are numerous alchemical uses for the flower and the plant's small amount of nectar and pollen. See Gundry's Alchemical Plants of the Kingdom of Caesinia for more information. I did not have that reference book, but at least I had good news for Maveth when I exited the dreamscape. He was still watching the earthen mound's entrance. Maveth, good news. We can build up immunity to the effects of the red vine flowers with repeated exposure. Maveth was chewing on a bear kidney he had just fried, his eyes focused on the entrance. We should do that instead of trying to kill the cockatrices. But one mistake, and I will be plant food, I noted. Do you not trust me to pull you to safety? Maveth's deep voice sounded hurt. Are you really trying to guilt-trip me right now? I countered. Guilt-trip? Maveth went into contemplation mode to puzzle out my colloquialism. I am sorry, Eric. I do not understand, he finally said, giving up. It does not matter. I will be the bait as I am accustomed to it. But right now the firebear is back, I noted, pointing and standing. Maveth's eyes flashed to the den. A day, give or take an hour, the Goliath stated confidently. Hopefully, every room is the same, so we can prepare, I said, watching the bear exit and shake its coat. The fur rippled, looking like flames, and I judged the bear to be the same size as the one we had killed a day ago. Well, big guy, it looks like we are going to be eating a lot of bear meat, I stated as I pulled the collector from my dimensional space and handing it to Maveth to hold on to while I dealt with the bear. I stepped into the room, and the bear locked its focus on me. I casually walked up to it, and it seemed more curious about me than ready to fight. Its eyes started to glow a fiery red, but those eyes were suddenly in my dimensional space. A giddy Maveth rushed into the room. I could eat this bear meat every day. I still do not understand your aversion to the kidneys. These are the tastiest I have ever eaten, he explained excitedly, handing the collector back to me while reaching for his skinning knife. Maveth attacked the bear with his skinning knife while I shattered the stone reward box. I had focused on the earthen mound, and this box just appeared in the blink of an eye. Maybe it was teleported by the dungeon with displacement magic. Maveth was not concerned with the chest, as his prize was the bear. Sifting through the debris, I gathered up the silver coins and the 2 potions. 1 healing and 1 aether recovery. I was pleased. The loot had remained the same. I turned the ether recovery potion in my hand. It was valuable, but I now had 3 of them. I broke the seal and drained it not, because I needed to, but so I would know what to expect when I used one in combat. The feeling was akin to drinking a hot beverage rapidly. The heat branched out from my stomach through my limbs and kept going. I realized the potion contained more ether than my core could contain, and bled away from my body into the environment once my core was full. It was wasted on someone with a small core like mine. On the bright side, it could quickly recharge my dimensional ability. I spent some time making one of the potions easily accessible under my armor. I then harvested another major fire essence from the bear. Maveth watched in fascination as the collector worked, and I snatched the essence before it rolled to the ground. However, when I offered it to Maveth, he was only interested in the essence of quickness. The apples were back as well, and I decided to pick them and let Maveth have all the fun processing the bear. I still had dried blood under my fingernails and in every crevice of my armor. I felt very unsanitary and smelled worse. The waterfall pond in the cockatrice chamber looked very appealing to me at the moment. With our luck, there was probably a 50-foot gator hiding in the water that fed on the cockatrices. I think there are fewer apples this time around, I noted to Maveth after I finished. I laid them all out on my tent tarp, and the pile seemed smaller. I am going to count and compare. Partly, I was curious, and also I would not have to help with the fire bear. Maveth was engrossed in his work and waved me to do the task. I found that I was right 214 last time, and now I had just 178. Were the apples growing back slower, or maybe the dungeon was not happy with me and how I was killing its creatures? We spent half a day in the room before returning to the vine room. The vines had completely retreated back inside, and the corridor was clear. "Do you have any rope?" Maveth asked. "No. Why would I have rope?" I said, confused. "You seem to have many things hidden in your space. Rope would have been a smart thing to have," Maveth said matter-of-factly. "We could have used it to tie around your waist and I could pull you to safety." "Well, I do not have any rope," I said tersely, as rope would have been a good idea. Then again, almost everything in my space had been liberated from Legion halls in various cities. I summoned some courage and entered the vine room again. I inhaled the sweet scent and backed out of the room. I made it about 10 feet before blacking out. When I woke, Maveth was standing over me. "Eric, you were only sleeping for half an hour this time." I gave him a thumbs up, but as I sat up, my head spun, and I vomited. I was having the worst hangover of my life. I washed out my mouth with water from a canteen. "I think I need more time between being exposed to the flowers, Maveth." It was a good half an hour before I felt right again, and the vines took another hour to retreat back into the room from the corridor. I still could have fought, but it would have been unpleasant. My next foray into the room had me taking about 8 minutes to recover under Maveth's watch, and the hangover was still prevalent but not any worse. On every trip after going into the room, the time decreased for how long I was forced to sleep. I lost track of how many times I was exposed to the flowers, but finally, I was able to inhale the sickly sweet scent and only feel slightly drowsy. It was time to try to clear the vines. This time, entering the vine room, I planned to hack the vines apart with the black blade. Maveth stood in the corridor, watching intently. He was ready to hold his breath, rush in and carry me away if I succumbed to the flowers. As I stepped into the room, I was able to enjoy the scent of the flowers with only slightly heavy eyes. The vines stirred as they had done a dozen times before. They left their alcoves and snaked across the floor slowly. None of the flowers were on the creeping vines along the floor. I was about to slash into the creeping vines when I thought better of it. Even though my runic weapon could not be dulled, according to Constantin, I sent it to my dimensional space and retrieved 2 of the elven hand axes I had taken from the forge. The vines moved so slowly that I could walk back casually while I hacked away. Maveth called from behind me, "Eric, do not cut them into sections that are too small. I can try making rope from the vines." I grunted at the request, as all 3 alcoves in the room were trying to grasp me with their vines and pull me in to digest me. I realized that perhaps a well-placed fireball here would make quick work of them. I had a pocket griffin rider that could cast fireballs. I tried to appease Maveth by just cutting 5-foot sections of vines off as I went. The sound of metal striking stone rang out repeatedly on the stone floor, and sticky sap soon coated the blade and my armor. The vines seemed endless as an hour progressed, and my arms started to feel achy from the repetitive swinging. The elven hatchets were also fairly dull from hundreds of strikes into the stone floor. "Eric, try cutting the base in one of the alcoves," Maveth advised anxiously from the hallway. Why was he anxious? I was the one doing all the work. I danced around the vines that had thinned considerably but kept coming. I moved to the alcove on the right, cautious and ready to retreat if I might get cornered. I hacked at the base of a thick stem coming out of the floor. All the vines from this alcove stilled as I truncated this plant. Soon I cut away the bases in the other 2 alcoves, and all the vines became still. The flowers wilted in seconds, and I guessed they needed to be harvested while the plant was alive. A stone chest appeared in the center of the room. "We won, Mavith," I said tiredly. Mavith's eyes widened in anticipation as he stepped into the room. He immediately got woozy and fell into the sappy mess. I laughed. At least my friend would also be covered in creeping vine sap. I could not even smell the sickly sweetness anymore, but must have still lingered in the air. I shattered the stone box, collecting 15 large silver coins and 1 unknown potion. I dragged my friend out of the room into the hallway. I returned to the room and attempted to use the collector at the base of the plants. A few wisps of emerald smoke formed, but the small disc would not pull it in. I thought this strange as I remembered Duranda's trying to use this on the shambling mounds. Maybe I had destroyed too much of the body, or the collector could not harvest plants. I moved the vines into a pile and sent the mess to my dimensional storage. The sap was drying, and the plates on my armor were no longer sliding easily across each other. It was getting increasingly difficult to move. Swearing to myself, I checked each alcove quickly and found nothing. Disappointed, I joined the sleeping Mavith in the corridor, removed my armor, and attempted to clean it before the sap completely dried. The oiled sections of the armor were easily cleaned, but the other sections were not, and I had to wait until they hardened enough to scrape off with a knife. Mavith woke before I finished, and as he stirred, I asked, "Have a good nap. My head is a little foggy, but yes, thank you." He suddenly realized where he was and sprang to his feet. "Eric, I'm sorry I fell. I barely smelled the flowers and thought they all wilted." I chuckled. "It is okay, Mavith. I do not think we will try the room again. There was only 1 potion in the reward chest," I said, calming him down. His eyes turned to the room and he groaned in disappointment. He thought the dungeon had absorbed the carnage I had wrought on the creeping vines. "Did you collect any of the vines for rope?" Mavith asked hopefully. I let him stew for a while before telling him with a grin, "I got you a little, but you will have to wait until we get to a safe room. Also, I do not know about the viability of the vines as the sap hardens." I pointed to his front, and Mavith began peeling dried sap off his soft leather clothes. After we cleaned up a bit, I asked, "Cockatrice room next? I am going to go into the dreamscape to see if I have any more information on the creatures. Watch over me while I am gone." It did not take long for me to find some references for the ugly birds in one of the elven bestiaries. Translating the script was a slow process. Cockatrice, these avian creatures are much more dangerous than they appear. The males of the species have azure blue combs and dark blue feathers. The females usually have deep brown feathers, but younger specimens can be tan. The saliva of these creatures is extremely corrosive and can petrify flesh. Multiple bites can turn a creature completely into stone. Severe damage can be done to a person's veins and arteries from a single bite and may result in death. The meat of the creature is considered a delicacy in many nations, not so much for the taste, but for the difficulty in harvesting it. Many people say they cannot tell the difference between chicken and cockatrice. The saliva of the cockatrice is useful in numerous alchemical preparations, but needs to be fresh, as it will lose efficacy soon after the bird's death. The rest of the text discussed habitats and had a few pictures. I was also able to decipher the runes on the potion. When I exited the dreamscape, Mavith let out a relieved breath. "You were in there for 2 hours, Eric. We probably should not linger in the corridors." I stood, reached up, and patted him on the shoulder reassuringly. "We are okay. I even found an elven book detailing the cockatrice, and there is good news. Their gaze cannot turn you to stony only. Their saliva can, so we need to ensure we do not get bitten." Mavith chewed on his lip, thinking, "Maybe I confused them with a basilisk." He looked away abashedly. "I do not want to be turned into a statue. I will count the birds before we enter. You will not have to approach the chamber." I tried to reassure the big, bald, gray man. Mavith reluctantly walked with me down the long, looping corridor to the massive domed room. He stayed back a good 50 feet while I scouted. The tall grass hid the birds, and I could now identify the males by their blue crests and the females by their brown. The cockatrices did not seem interested in me as they scavenged in the long grass. Mavith impatiently rumbled, "How many do you see?" Give me some time, I replied, scanning the area. I was envious of one of the female cockatrices bathing in the pool as it preened its feathers. Another male cockatrice snapped its head up with a thick worm in its mouth before swallowing it. I watched for almost an hour, but may have missed some resting birds. We can handle 7 together, right? Mavaith did not look too thrilled at the prospect. I will give you your bow, and maybe you can kill 1 or 2 before they even reach us. He brightened at that thought. We slowly prepared to enter the room, Mavith's confidence steadily growing. One of the females approached our corridor, curious about us. As it got closer, Mavith shielded his eyes, but I was confident in my interpretation of the text. It was not a pretty bird. The closer it got, the uglier it looked. It was a cross between a turkey and a lizard, with sporadic feathers and a scaly tail. The wings were tucked into its sides, but were featherless and more bat-like. They looked more edible from a distance, I commented to Mavith. Mavith slowly opened his eyes to look at the creature. Some people had a fear of water, and Mavith had a fear of being turned into a statue. It is ugly, he said, laughing hoarsely. The bird rushed at us in the corridor. Surprised, I readied my black blade. It launched itself into the air and came at me feet first, claws extended. The bird slammed into the archway, an invisible force preventing it from reaching us. The failed attack was accompanied by a loud clucking challenge, which caused the remaining birds to come out of the grass. 7 more joined the female, 4 males and 3 females. So, my count had been off by 1. The cockatrices were agitated as they pranced around the archway, making a racket. They stood almost 3 feet tall, and I could see viscous yellow saliva on their tongues. I backed away from the room and pulled Mavaith with me. Let them settle down, and we can come back. They swarmed to the door this time, but not all at once. Mavith nodded. We rested and snacked on apples and berries before returning to the archway. Mavith, with his bow ready, and I with the black blade. Only one of the males was close to the corridor this time. Ready? I asked, and he reluctantly nodded. I will take this one. Shoot them as they race out of the grass. I stepped into the room, and the male nearby made a huge racket to summon the family, crowing like a malevolent rooster. It launched into the air and stunned itself when it slammed into my invisible shield. I quickly sidestepped and beheaded the confused cockatrice. As the head satisfyingly hit the ground, I was shocked as the body started running around, pumping out small spurts of blood. Thankfully, it had no awareness of me and ran into the wall of the chamber. The distraction almost cost me as the other 7 were rushing us. Mavith's bow sang, and a thick arrow thudded satisfyingly into the male leading the charge. It rolled away, clearly incapacitated, and out of the fight. Of course, our plan to take them a few at a time did not work, as the 4 trailing cockatrices took to the air to catch up. An arrow from Mavith took out a second running cockatrice. Only 5 left, I said encouragingly as they closed. Mavith's bow sang again, but I was focused on my own fight and did not see where the arrow went. I set 2 shields, 1 high and 1 low, for the 2 flyers and 1 running at me. Why did 3 of the 4 remaining cockatrices target me? Mavith was the much bigger target. I waited until they slammed into my shields, and then moved to the side. One of the flyers tumbled toward me after striking the air disc. I timed my swing, beheaded the confused bird before it hit the ground, and dodged the decapitated head as it nearly hit me. The runner recovered quickly and dashed toward me. A quick air shield cast through my foot was supposed to halt the female's charge, but it flapped its wings, launching itself over the shield and going for my face. I did not want to risk the beak getting close, so I used my dimensional space to remove the head and deflected the headless body with my round shield. Taking in the chaos, I yelled to Mavaith, "Above you, Mavaith!" The other flyer that I had deflected off my shield was now above him and closing in. While I had been busy, Mavith had dropped his bow and crushed the other cockatrice with his hammer. Mavith went into a rapid forward roll, his massive body moving faster than it probably had a right to, and he came up facing the other direction, already swinging his hammer. The cockatrice, with claws outstretched, crumbled under the force of the hammer blow and was thrown a good distance away. The cockatrice's body was crushed, and it struggled to move, clucking pitifully. The fight had only taken a few seconds, but my heart was still racing from the combat. A few clucks from dying cockatrices overcame the noise of the waterfall. "Stay on guard until the reward chest shows," I walked around and carefully dispatched the mostly dead birds. Only one of the ones with an arrow in it put up any fight, but the arrow shaft greatly hampered its movement. We stayed away from the tall grass around the pool for now, and I used the collector on the cockatrices while Maveth remained on watch. "I think I see a box on the shore," Maveth said excitedly as I kneeled over the first male cockatrice I had killed, removing the collector from my minimalist packed backpack. I knew Maveth was not excited about the treasure. It was just that the chest signaled that all the petrifying birds had been killed, and he was no longer at risk of being turned to stone. The blue smoke was thick, and I watched the essence form on the collector. A rich brown apex essence formed with swirls of gray moving in the spherion. Earth affinity essence. The rest of the roosters yielded major earth essences. The 4 female cockatrices all yielded clear major essences that could be mistaken for glass balls. These were aether tolerance essences that were useful in resisting magic. It was an excellent haul, and Maveth might want the earth essences to improve his shapestone spell form. Together, we walked to the pool in the center of the chamber. The cooling mist from the splashing waterfall was welcome. There were 4 nests in the grass, but no eggs. A few green leaves sprouted from the ground that I recognized as wild onions. Somewhere under the soil were fat worms, and I wondered if they would also yield an essence. We reached the shore, and I shattered the stone box to reveal a dozen silver coins and a balled-up dark gray cloak. A piece of clothing was slightly disappointing, and after unfurling it, it was too small for Maveth to wear, and too small for me to wear over my armor as well. It would fit me without my armor, but Maveth would probably be upset if I wore this over the manticore cloak he made for me. I sent it to my dimensional space. "What now?" Maveth asked over the noise of the water. "Now we bathe," I said happily as I walked into the shallow water with my armor still on. The water was cool as it soaked my boots, then my socks, and my linen pants, working its way up my body. I was waist-deep, and a cloud of filth was spreading out from me, fouling the clear water. "Maveth, come on in. The water is fine." Maveth stood on the shore, uncertain. We saw the cockatrice bathing. There is nothing dangerous in the water. The tall Goliath looked around the room, turning his head slowly. "I think I will harvest the cockatrices first. That way I do not have to bathe twice. I will also retrieve my arrows." I rolled my eyes at Maveth. "Well, I saw some wild onion stems among the tall grass. You can dig them up as well." Maveth's deep voice sounded hurt that I thought he could not spot the dark green stems of the onions. "I saw them too, Eric. There looks to be some garlic as well." "Did you see the garlic?" he challenged somewhat playfully. "No. Is there garlic too? If you start pulling up the root vegetables, see if you can capture some of the worms the cockatrices were eating. I want to see if I can use the collector on them." Maveth looked doubtful at that statement. I started removing my armor, one piece at a time, cleaning it before tossing it into the grass to dry. Maveth focused on the cockatrices. I would throw him in if he tried not to bathe. We both smelled so foul that we no longer noticed how bad it was. After my armor was off and cleaned to the best of my ability, I worked on my clothes, soaking and rinsing them repeatedly until they no longer produced clouds in the water. The dirty water quickly settled into the sandy bottom, filtering downward. Eventually, I was completely naked, so I produced my shaving kit to retrieve the small bar of soap inside. I then returned the rest of the kit. I scrubbed out every crack and crevice of dirt, dried blood, and sap. I used the entire bar of soap, but it was worth it. I moved under the waterfall and began to rinse my hair and scrub my face. I remained under the cascading water until my skin was puckered, pale, and perfectly clean. I had spent 2 hours bathing, and Maveth worked the entire time. I might have felt guilty if I had not asked him to join me a dozen times while he worked. I pulled out clean underclothes from my storage and dressed. I only had one spare pair of Legion boots in my space, and I was wearing them now. I no longer felt like a soldier on an infinite campaign. I felt almost human, if I was not trapped deep inside a dungeon that was trying to kill me. Maveth had a tarp in the grass with a stack of bird meat and organs. There was a pile of small wild onions and a second pile of some pungent bulbous wild garlic. The onions and garlic would give our meals a lot of flavor in the future. After bathing for the first time in weeks, I was reluctant to dig them up. "Eric, if you cook, I will bathe. We have about 8 hours before we should leave." I nodded, and was glad the Goliath was tracking our time as well. The last thing either of us wanted was to be caught bathing when the cockatrices respawned. Maveth finally stripped and entered the water to wash himself and his gear. I focused on cooking. I heated some bear fat in Maveth's cast iron pan. I cut up several onions and 2 garlic cloves and cooked them. One of the cockatree's breasts was cut into thin strips, and I ground up some pepper. I seasoned each side with a little salt and pepper, then seared both sides of the bird meat, cooking it through. I folded the crispy meat like a taco and filled it with onions sautéed and garlic. I munched on the first one, enjoying the texture and flavors. As I prepared the second, I called Maveth over. He came out of the water to get his cockatree's taco, naked. "Damn, Maveth, watch where you swing that thing." He ignored me, and the taco was gone in 2 bites. "That was tasty. Can I get 6 more?" His deep voice asked eagerly. His statement brought back nightmares of working at a fast food restaurant in high school, trying to keep up during the weekend lunch rush because half the staff called out sick. "Keep washing, and no service without shoes, shorts, and a shirt?" I told the Goliath. He was confused by the sudden requirements but waded back into the water. "I will let you know when it is ready. I made 2 more for myself before preparing 6 for Maveth. Can I cook the greens from the onions and garlic?" I asked Maveth, who was dressing. Maveth considered. "Onion greens are bitter, but garlic greens taste like their bulbs, and I have used them before in my cooking." I chopped up the garlic stems and added them to the next round of stir-fry. Maveth ate 9 of the tacos before he was finally full, and topped them with a cup of his appleberry jam for dessert. I had a cup of savory sweet jam myself. "After we harvest as much onion and garlic as possible, we will explore the passage," I said. There was a passage directly opposite the one where we had entered the massive, domed room. "I am hoping we never have to fight these birds again." He crunched into his last taco. "But they are tasty." Personally, I thought they tasted closer to turkey than chicken, but all the flavor came from the bear fat, onions, and garlic. We had only used up one of the massive breasts, too, so we had a lot of meat remaining. As I pulled garlic and onions from the ground, I searched for the elusive worms. I even tried placing the collector on the ground in a few spots, hoping the worms were close to the surface to pull their essence. I had no luck. Maveth found the first worm when he pulled up the waist-high grass to inspect the roots. Apparently they nested in the roots. I felt cheated when the finger-sized worm released tiny wisps of blue smoke, but did not produce an essence. I tried it on multiple worms, but it never produced an essence. So much for the collector working on every creature in a dungeon. We washed our hands, and I stored the harvest. We filled our water from the falls and finally left the idyllic room. The corridor was the same as elsewhere, but the room 50 feet down the corridor was not. It was a square chamber, 20 feet on each side. A stone shelf was on the left and right walls, 3 feet deep. Across from us was the most confusing sight. A wide stairway going up. We did not enter the room as we both pondered it. "There is writing on the wall, Eric," Maveth said, pointing. It was hard to see, as it looked to have faded with time, but there was elven script above one of the recessed shelves. "I think this is a safe room, and those are sleeping alcoves. Otherwise, the dungeon would have erased the writing on the wall." I stepped into the room, trusting my instincts. Nothing leaped out to attack me, and I cautiously approached the writing. It was in elven script. "It is a safe room," I said to the relieved Maveth, who joined me. "It is going to take me a little while to decipher this. Do you want the dreamscape amulet?" "I would be grateful for it, yes," his deep voice intoned. While Maveth made himself comfortable in the other alcove with the dreamscape amulet, I translated the ancient writing. Maveth soon started sleeping deeply, and I slowly figured things out. The script indicated our location. We were on the 3rd level of the labyrinth in a special series of rooms. It warned of the cockatrices, firebear, and shapeshifters. The dark room was the real prize in the corner of this dungeon, as it contained silver ore with trace amounts of mithril. Apparently, there were better places to mine mithril, as this was not a popular path due to the cockatrices and greater doppelgangers guarding it. There was no reference to what was at the top of the stairs. My curiosity got the better of me. I would climb the stairs and check. Maybe there was another safe room at the top. The stairs corkscrewed as I climbed, and I counted the steps. It seemed to go on forever, and I worried I might not be back before Maveth woke. I assumed I was heading toward the second layer of the labyrinth and getting closer to the others from the company. Perhaps the rooms on the second layer would not be as dangerous. I reached the top of the stairs and did not like what I found. An oval chamber with a glass floor where giant eels swam underneath. No, it was not glass, it was ice. This room was a skating rink. There were 2 exits, though. The question was whether the eels were the monsters, or if they were what the Guardian ate. I studied the room, but the only activity seemed to be under the ice. I was about to leave when movement on the ceiling caught my eye. The body of something had blended in nearly perfectly. The creature gave up hiding and dropped to the ice as I focused on it. 6 thick legs, ending in terrible claws, scratched the glass like ice, marring the surface and throwing chunks. The dark blue lizard-like creature was larger than a horse and growled at me, clearly unhappy with my presence. It paced on the ice, its claws ripping up chunks as it went. I watched in horrific fascination, as if I were at a zoo and perfectly safe on the other side of the bars. After 20 minutes of prancing for me, the muscular creature burrowed into the ice in seconds. I could see it under the ice hunting the large eels. It was not long before it scored a victory and burst out of the ice at a different spot from where it had entered. The ice appeared to be about 6 inches thick from the chunks that had been washed across the rink. I was curious about how the chamber was reset to make the surface of the ice smooth. But I needed to get back to Maveth. If only one creature existed in this chamber, then it should not be too difficult. Maveth was still sleeping when I returned down the 206 steps to the safe room. When Maveth woke, we needed to make a big decision. Would we leave this part of the dungeon with the familiar monsters and rooms, or would we go to the second layer and explore unknown threats while attempting to find the others? I let Maveth sleep as I prepared breakfast for both of us, finally dicing some bear meat to make patties. As I worked, I popped one of the clear essences into my mouth. This would raise and fortify my ether tolerance, which indicated my natural resistance to channeling substantial amounts of aether. If a mage pulled too much ether too quickly, they risked burning out their ether channels. The old healer in Sobral was burnt out. I thought I might be at risk of the same if I started using the ether restorative potions. As the sphere dissolved, the world around me and my perception of it momentarily muted. It felt like the opposite effect of the perception essence. My best guess was that the dungeon was so saturated with aether that it affected me. The smell of cooking meat roused Maveth, who took over the cooking duties after handing me the amulet. "How did it go, Maveth? It was cathartic. I will never get tired of seeing my sister again," he rumbled with strong emotion. He smiled widely. "We fought the orcs and Enkegs together, and were victorious. I am glad. How about you use the amulet every third rest? Just remind me," I offered. "I would appreciate it. You are a true friend to let me use something so precious," he intoned deeply while nodding enthusiastically. "Do you want another quickness essence?" I asked, already holding the small green spheres in my hand. Maveth nodded eagerly, and I placed all the remaining dark green essences into his hands, which widened his eyes in surprise. "Just take one a day. Let me know when you run out, and you can choose something else." Maveth swallowed one immediately and placed the remaining spheres in his pocket. He focused on cooking, as he was the much better cook. Maveth handed me the finished meal: bear patties and apple slices drizzled with hot appleberry jam. While we ate, he asked, "Did you take one of the magic affinities?" "No, I took an ether tolerance essence. I had trouble the last time I used a magic affinity essence, and have been reluctant to try again." I winced reflexively, recalling the pain from the earth essence I consumed, how abused my body was afterward, and the foul stench I emitted. "I am here to watch over you, Eric." His deep voice became serious. "You have many secrets. I will keep any you are willing to share. There was something about the big gray man that just made you want to trust him. I will consider it." I also explored up the stairs. It is a big climb and ends in a frozen lake chamber with a giant lizard that can burrow through the ice. It hunts large eels in the water. I continued to explain what I had found at the top of the stairs. My description of the creature did not ring any bells for Maveth. "I am going to get some sleep with the amulet. I will see if I can figure out what the creature is." Maveth looked anxious. "Can you leave the vines? I can start on the rope." Maybe leave the reader table out as well? I smirked as he was clearly getting addicted to tracking his progress. The essences would not affect him much, but regaining his lost muscle and body mass would quickly raise his physical stats. I left the tablet reader table and the pile of vines for him. Entering the dreamscape, everything looked normal until I entered the Ankeg room. The strong metallic smell of blood assaulted my senses. Dozens of abused orc corpses littered the room alongside 2 foul-smelling dead Ankegs. I muttered, "At least clean up after yourself, Mavith." I eliminated all smells first, removing the orc bodies and resetting the room. I would have to tell him that the amulet remained as he left it. With the room clean and live Ankegs hibernating underground, I headed toward the scorpion room. In the water room with the centipede fish, I was shocked to find Zarana swimming. Seeing me, she left the water, climbing onto the floating stone in front of me, and she was naked. I averted my eyes. "Sorry, I didn't know you were in here." Then I remembered I was in the dreamscape and took in her body. I had impure thoughts and wondered just what Mavith was doing with his sister in the dreamscape. "Is Mavith back?" Zarana asked as I remained speechless. I used my power in the dreamscape to clean her clothes and put them on her body. She looked at the garments, disappointed either in their style or just in being clothed. "No, Zarana, why are you in this room?" Which sounded like a stupid question. Her deep, feminine voice laughed, cleaning the blood of the orcs off. "Of course. How? Did Mavith let you wander the dungeon?" I was trying to figure out what freedoms this construct Mavith created had. "Mavith said I could do whatever I wanted. I wanted to swim," she said with a mischievous grin. "Do you want to join me? You are Eric Mavith's little friend." Little friend, I guess, compared to the 7-foot bald, gray-skinned Goliath woman in front of me. I would appear that way. "Yes, that is me, but I have too much work to do. Perhaps another time." I hopped across the stones, and Zarana followed me to the scorpion room uninvited. When I removed the wall, I was not surprised to see Zarana's construct was missing. Oscar came rushing at me, eager for attention. The Aussie was ready to play. The men were playing cards. No combat training today. I preempted any questions from the disappointed men. Constantine's construct barked, "He is getting soft." I muted the entire table, including Mavith, who Zarana did not seem to recognize as her brother. I questioned Zarana. "Did you tell or show Mavith this secret room?" "No, he never asked about it," Zarana replied truthfully. "Good. Never show it to him or tell him about it. You can continue to do what you want in the dungeon," I said, sitting in my plush chair with the elven bestiaries. Zarana stood behind my chair, looking over my shoulder. "What are you doing back there?" "I was hoping you would read to me," she said happily, leaning on the back of my chair and rocking it slightly. I pinched my nose. It felt wrong to be rude to the construct of Mavith's sister. She seemed a mix of mischievousness and innocence. "Fine, just don't interrupt me," I said. Oscar hopped in my lap, seeing we were not playing ball. I paged through all the bestiaries but did not find the blue lizard with big claws. I did manage to identify the potion from the creeping vine room. It was a protection from heat. I suppose that meant fire, but I was not sure. I recreated the elven potions from the summoner and identified them as well. Lesser Aether Restoration, Lesser Stamina, and an Empathy Enhancement potion. The dominant creature was the best potion I had liberated from the dead summoner. I'd been reading aloud and completely forgotten Zarana was behind me. She was clearly one of those annoying personality sextroverts. "It has been about 6 hours. I have to go and help Mavith," I said. I expected her to ask me to come, but she clearly knew she could not. I looked at the silenced poker table. "You all can wander the dungeon and interact with Big Z here." I did not let her challenge the nickname as I teleported to the entry room and left the dungeon. Sitting up, Mavith looked at me expectantly from his work, creating a rope from the vines. "Mavith, you do realize the dreamscape remains however you leave it. You left all those dead orcs and your sister unattended." Mavith's eyes got wide in surprise. "I am sorry, I didn't know." "Be careful when you clean up. I don't want the environments to reset. I have some things in the scorpion room I don't want to have to recreate," I told him, taking another step down the trust road. He nodded and added, "I understand." "I understand. Is Zarana okay?" I closed my eyes. She is not real, Mavith. She is just constructed from your memories by the amulet in the dreamscape. Do not get too attached. But yes, she is fine and hanging out with everyone else in the Scorpion Room. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He had come to terms with what happened to his sister but could not let her go. The problem with the dreamscape constructs was that they behaved exactly as you expected them to. I hoped Mavith did not become too attached. I will check and see if the cockatrices are back. You can wait here, I said. You can wait here, I said. It had been over a day since we cleared the room. As I approached, I could already see the cockatrices in the grass looking for worms. They were back. I spent a few minutes trying to count them to see if the number had changed. I only counted 6, but that did not mean anything, as a few could be in the nests. I returned and gave Mavith the unwelcome news. The cockatrices are back. We either have to deal with them again, or go up and handle the blue lizard. Mavith dropped the cordage he had been working on. About 20 feet of the thick rope had been completed, but he had almost used the entire pile of vines I had salvaged. I prefer to go up, but will follow whatever you want to do. Mavith stretched and flexed his fingers from working on the rope. He asked a question I was not ready to answer. What about the elf griffin rider? What about her? We have not reached a part of the dungeon that would require a third person yet, I said, and I could see that Mavith thought much differently by his facial expression. Mavith put his thoughts in order. We were outnumbered in the cockatrice room. An ally would have been most welcome. You almost got overrun. I explained my concerns. She is not going to trust us. Well, trust me anyway, as I am wearing my legionnaire armor. As soon as I heal her, she will attack me. Then I will not be able to sleep, knowing she is nearby, probably thinking about slitting my throat. You can always just her back in your space, Mavith rationalized in a sage-like tone. He had obviously been thinking about this. It would take me 2 hours to recover enough aether to put a live person in the space, and if I cannot, we have to kill her and waste a healing potion on her. I could tell Mavith was going to be pushing for her release even before he spoke. I will restrain her and protect you. Goliaths are known to be honorable people among the elves. She should listen to reason, Mavith argued. I ended the discussion by saying, let's clean up and look at the ice room together. My tone left no room for debate. We could not leave anything behind. The dungeon appeared to let writing remain on the walls, but anything on the floor was absorbed after we left, which was nice since there were no toilets in the safe room. The 200+ steps up following the corkscrew pattern were done in silence. I knew Mavith well enough to know he was planning arguments for releasing the elf griffin rider. When we got to the room, it was just a sheet of clear ice. The large eels were underneath the sheet and swimming, oblivious to our presence. I scanned the ceiling, looking for the creature. There, Mavith. See how the river of light seems to go around that spot. Mavith focused, but the creature was not moving. We stared, and suddenly the creature dropped to the ice, aware its camouflage was exposed. As it hit the ice, its mass caused spider cracks to form under its 6 legs, each ending in a nasty locking claw. Mavith inhaled sharply, and the creature looked ferocious. It is some horror I have never seen. The creature's beady blue eyes focused on us. Maybe the elf rider knows what it is, Mavith suggested, causing me to roll my eyes. The creature started stalking the room, repeatedly judging us. It was clearly frustrated that it could not reach us. We waited, making sure a second creature was not in the room. Since it is just one creature, I can take it. It looks fast, Eric. Be careful. Mavith strung his bow and got his last 3 arrows ready. I had not even realized the other arrows had cracked or snapped. The creature dug its claws into the ice, and with 6 legs, it did look fast. I stepped onto the ice, leaving the protection of the corridor. The head of the creature snapped to me, its black eyes sizing me up. It did not look afraid. All 6 legs locked into the ice. Shit. If it delved through the ice and attacked from underneath, I was fucked. My armor was not dense but did not float either. Thankfully, it charged me, and the ice erupted beneath it. The sheet rocked from the creature's mass, and cracks spread with an eerie, rolling, cracking sound. Dodging it would be difficult on the ice, so I planned to jump over it after taking its head. At 50 feet away, it opened its maw and screamed, and a cone of snow, frost, and freezing air blasted toward me. The temperature dropped rapidly, and a snowy haze blocked my vision. Panic started to form in my stomach as my corneas quickly froze, causing my vision to blur and darken. The thudding sound of the approaching monstrosity was all I could focus on. I enlarged the box and listened, guessing at the appropriate time. I moved the box I had made into my dimensional space and felt strong resistance, a good sign I had gotten some of the creature. I tried to move, but the cold had slowed me. The sound of nails on a chalkboard hit my ears, and I figured it was the creature's claws sliding on the surface of the ice. That was all I figured out as it slammed into me, whipping my head back and throwing my helmet away. I was catapulted hard into the wall behind me, slamming my head and knocking me unconscious. I was having a really bad dream. I had been transported to a world full of magic and dangerous monsters, and forced to serve in the Legion. My eyes opened painfully, a crusty feeling on my eyelids. A bluish light dilated my pupils, and a blurry image of a bald gray man stood over me. My mind slowly pieced everything back together, and the memories flooded back in. Maveth said something that I missed. It sounded muffled to my ears. His deep voice became clearer as he tried again, more insistently. "Where are the healing potions?" I was confused when he asked about the healing potions, and I tried to speak. My jaw was on fire as it moved reluctantly, and other centers of pain began to announce themselves across my body as my nerves mapped the damage. I croaked out. Under my chest piece, Maveth fished around in my armor and found the vial. Relief in his voice, he said, "I will pour it in your mouth. Swallow it," he ordered sternly. My taste buds only registered the blood in my mouth as the ether restoration potion worked. It was my only potion not in my dimensional space, but it gave me ether to pull an actual healing potion from my dimensional storage. I then had only a heartbeat to funnel ether as fast as I could into my healing spell form, before the overflow of ether bled away into the environment. I was only moderately successful in using the overflowing ether from my core. I held up the retrieved healing potion with difficulty. My arm was clearly broken. It was still hard to speak, so I said, "Healing potion," offering it to Maveth to feed me. "What happened?" I croaked. My memory still fuzzy from what had transpired after the lizard breathed a blizzard on me. "Eric, you cannot take two different potions so close in time to each other. It would be best if you waited at least an hour," Maveth said worriedly. I tried to laugh, but even a small chuckle elevated my pain awareness, reminding me just how much of a mess I was. I tried to relax and focus on using my own ether to heal my extensive injuries. "What happened?" I repeated more clearly. "The creature hit you on the ice and threw you into the wall. After you bounced off the wall, it hit you again and crushed you into the wall. Your skin was frozen from the cloud of frost, and your eyes did not look good. I did not think you lived, as that creature is easily over 2,000 pounds. Maveth was still worried about my fate as one of my bones snapped back into alignment. I was worried for another reason. The collector was in my backpack, and I feared it might have been damaged. My injuries were under control. After healing my head enough to think straight, I focused on my internal wounds. "I am healing myself. Use the collector on the creature. If I pass out, use the healing potion on me." It took a lot of effort to get the words out. Maveth did as I asked, and I focused on healing. My armor had done a decent job of protecting me, much better than when the wyvern slammed into me. Broken bones seemed to be my biggest issue. I quickly burned through my available ether, and was still in rough shape. Realigning bone with ether was not only painful, but also required more ether than healing tissue. I was taking a break from healing when Maveth stood over me again, proudly holding a large apex essence in one hand, and the collector in the other. It looked like a sphere containing dark blue water. It was a water affinity essence. I nodded as the pain was preventing me from moving. "How long was I out?" "1/3 of an hour," Maveth said, concern still evident on his face. My vision cleared as I healed my eyes from the damage to my cornea. Blinking rapidly, I saw Maveth pulling me out of the room and into the corridor. Maveth indicated the room. "The ice in the room is melting. I think the creature was keeping it frozen with its freezing breath." Maveth bit his lip. Also, when we entered, all the exits turned into solid stone, trapping us inside. I forced myself to sit up. The ice had a thin sheen of water on top. Even if the ice completely thawed, There was a small ledge along the wall that we could walk on to circle the room. As I studied the area, Mavith's concern faded as my body healed. "Your face and ears have frostbite," he pointed out. I was focused on Mavith's comment about the dungeon locking us in the room. It had not done that before. I recalled the scorpion room from my first dungeon experience, which had done that to me. Maybe the final room of a floor prevented you from retreating. I shared my thoughts with Mavith. I think the room was more challenging and locked us in because it gives access to a deeper level of the dungeon. I touched the tip of my nose. Pain radiated from it, and my nose was slightly stiff. My healing was able to restore the damage from the frostbite. My aether was low again, so I paused while it recovered naturally. "Mavith, do you want to catch the eels? I have some fishing line." Mavith looked at the melting ice. "I am not familiar with this type of eel, but it should be edible. I do not think we should try the meat from the lizard you killed. Its blood is blue, and the meat is pale white. Neither are good signs for consumption. I want to harvest essences from the eels. I am not really concerned about eating them. We also need to decide if we are going to head back to the safe room at the bottom of the stairs or use one of the two exits up here. With that ranged breath weapon, I am not sure we should attempt this room again. I should be completely healed in half a day, so this is unnecessary." I made a show of sliding the healing potion under my armor in the pocket where the ether restoration had rested. Now, Mavith knew where he could find it next time. There was also a stone reward chest in the center of the ice. Mavith was reluctant to walk out on the surface to retrieve it. I removed my armor temporarily to lighten myself, and had enough aether to cast at least 3 air discs to stand on if the ice could not support me. The ice groaned and cracked as I walked toward the reward chest. As I picked it up, the ice splintered further, and I retreated to the corridor with Mavith. I unceremoniously dropped the chest to shatter it. Silver coins spread across the floor, and a distinctive yellow of gold appeared in the mix 5 gold coins. We sifted through the messy debris. Not seeing a potion or other item, Mavith found a silver ring blending in with the coins. "This ring is probably an artifact, Mavith. Do you want it?" I asked. Mavith held up his hand with his thick fingers. "I don't think it will fit, Eric." "Well, when we get out of here, you will get your share of the coins," I reassured him. Mavith looked at the watery ice. I think we should use those corridors and try to find the others. With how close I had been to death, it was more apparent we needed help." "I agree. Let us move to the corridor on the right." I was not confident about walking across the ice again, so I moved slowly along the narrow ledge. My body was still healing, so every little slip was uncomfortable as I kept my balance. Mavith's wide body stepped on the ice every few steps when the ledge got narrow, and it creaked under his weight, but it held. We sheltered in the new corridor, and I gave Mavith both of my fishing kits. He shattered the ice with his hammer, creating a hole, and I gave him the chunk of the lizard I had sent to my space for bait. With Mavith occupied in fishing, I gratefully slid down the wall, my armor scraping on the stone. I started to eat in order to recover reserves and fight off exhaustion. Mavith caught the first eel almost immediately. The 4-foot eel was dark gray with a silvery belly. He smashed its head and slid it toward me. I pulled out the collector and noticed it had a small dent in it. I needed to be more careful with this artifact in the future. I had thought carrying it was smarter for easier access since my ether took time to recover after I killed a creature. Instead, I had almost broken one of my most valued possessions. I used the collector, and the blue wisps pulled into the collector formed a dark green minor essence. Mavith, quickness essence. I held it up for him, and Mavith's eyes lit up with eagerness. I was guiltily greedy myself, and would gladly give him minor essences, while keeping the apex essences for myself, although I admit being quicker might have just saved me from almost dying. While Mavith pulled eel after eel out, I used the collector and continued healing the damage to my body. Mavith tossed the eels out onto the ice as they smelled fairly horrible, and we decided not to try the meat. Hours passed, and the bites came less and less frequently. There was a heap of 23 minor dark green essences. Mavith suddenly stood and backed away from the entrance to the room. I was on alert and stood as well. What is it? The corpse of the lizard creature just disappeared. I looked up, and it was gone. "I think the room is resetting," Mavith noted, and we both watched from the corridor's safety. "How long did it take?" I asked Maveth since he had a better feel for time than I did. Maveth bit his lip, thinking. I think just under a day. Maybe exactly a day. I drifted off a few times while waiting for a bite. A huge cloud of frosty snow erupted from the ceiling. The frigid blast quickly froze the water on the ice, resulting in a glass-like finish. The eels did not seem to have repopulated yet. I could only see a few eels deep in the water. The dark blue lizard landed on the ice, which was definitely smaller than the one I had recently killed. I was still not eager to fight this particular creature again. We watched it survey its domain before I said, Maveth, take the essences. We should get going and see where this leads. I was hoping to explore both options before deciding, but I lost track of time, and we will have to settle for this corridor. I had completely healed. My only pain was my stomach requesting fuel. Reluctantly, I sent the collector to my dimensional storage to protect it from my own shortcomings. We walked down the straight corridor, maybe 200 feet, to the next room. It was another large chamber with a few full-grown trees, creating a small forest. I thought the trees were oak-cat, least the leaves were shaped like oak leaves I recalled from Earth. Do you see anything, Maveth? In the trees, his deep voice echoed above and behind me. A large mantis is eating leaves. He had to point out the green creature for me. It was not large, maybe the length of my arm. Maveth voiced what I was thinking. They are not overly dangerous. I am guessing they are sustenance for something much more deadly. We started to get frustrated trying to find the threat in the room. We spotted at least 4 of the mantises, but no overt threat. The room almost looked peaceful, with 19 large oak trees, a high ceiling, and much brighter lighting than in other rooms. We sat facing each other in the corridor, resting our backs on the wall, and started to make dinner. We watched the room trying to figure out the threat before entering. Maveth cooked with the thermal stone between his legs. I could tell he was tired, and we needed to sleep somewhere safe soon. As we ate some seared bear meat, a flash of movement occurred in the trees. What was it? I asked Maveth, who was studying the trees with me. We could hear crunching as the mantis was being devoured in the canopy. I think it was a spider, but it was fast and I don't know what type. As if the first attack was a catalyst, other flashes occurred in the upper branches as more spiders decided it was dinner time. I don't see any webbing, I said, as the blue-white spiders dashed among the branches harvesting the mantises. They could be nesting inside the trees. I counted over 10, Maveth noted, still focused above. I have never seen a blue-white spider before. I think I remember something in the books in the Dreamscape library. I will go and check. I put the amulet in my hand and entered the dreamscape. I ignored the people and Oscar, as I did not want to be gone too long. I found the entry in the Elven Bestiary and focused on translating it. They were a variety of phased spiders that could make themselves incorporeal to avoid attacks or surprise prey. The ones we noticed were slightly smaller than the entry, about the size of a dog. They were venomous, and the poison was a paralytic. They nested in trees and caves. Their webbing was only used to preserve prey and cocoon their eggs, as they did not make webs. They were noted as extremely dangerous foes. I returned to Maveth and informed him of what I had learned. They are called phased spiders. Their bite can paralyze you, but they can also make themselves incorporeal. We have enchanted weapons which should make that point moot. Maveth was pointing, drawing my gaze. Shit. There was a mama phased spider the size of a horse. We watched the smaller spiders bring the large parts of their mantis harvests as offerings. The large spider used its legs to put the pieces into its mouth, making loud and disturbing crunching sounds as it snacked. Maveth asked, "Is it time to bring out the elf griffin rider?" There were so many enemies in the room that Maveth and I would be outnumbered. I was not optimistic about returning to the ice room to explore the other corridor. 12 small spiders gave offerings to the big one. That makes 13 total, Maveth said from his observations. I do not see an exit from this room. The trees could be blocking it, but this could be a dead end, I reasoned. Maybe we fight the blue lizard and try the other corridor. Maveth seemed to consider. I think we will eventually return here. We should try this room. Venom usually takes time to work or requires multiple bites to become effective. I think we can do this, but having the elf as an ally makes it safer. I was still reluctant. If she doesn't stab us in the back while we are fighting. I wavered for minutes before finally conceding. Fine, Mavith. I will bring out the Griffin Rider, and we will try to reason with her. It was going to happen no matter my reservations. As Mavith repeatedly pointed out, the danger level was too high in the dungeon, and we needed allies. I had 2 healing potions and 2 Aether Restoration potions left. I handed Mavith the other healing potion from my dimensional space and held an Aether Restoration in my hand. Mavith looked expectantly at me. I think I am going to remove my armor and store it. If she sees the Red Legion armor, she may panic. After storing the armor, I changed into some ordinary clothes. I had nice clothes I purchased in Telha, but I did not think they were appropriate for this occasion. Mavith sucked his cheek, inspecting me. Eric, you look a little tough, like someone who would be in a press gang. Even though we had washed in the cockatrice chamber, we both looked a little rough. I took out my barber's bag and used the small mirror. My scraggly beard from malnourishment had not fully grown back. My black shoulder-length hair was matted from my helmet, and my teeth were stained blue from the blueberries. Altogether, it made me look a little menacing. I would run from me too. I started with the mouthwash. The mint-infused liquid strengthened my teeth, purified my breath, and whitened my teeth. Spitting the used potion resulted in a dark blue stain on the wall. I tested my teeth and was happy they felt smooth. My gums had recovered as well. I gave Mavith a dose as well. Then, I had him hold the mirror while I shaved and trimmed my beard and hair. Mavith expounded on the benefits of being hairless while I worked. I cut myself 3 times with a straight-edge razor, but it did not matter as I healed the cuts immediately with my spell form. It felt surreal doing this in a dangerous dungeon. Also, there was the fact I was prettying up for an enemy who would likely try and kill me. Mavith was hairless. He just needed to wash his gray-skinned head and hands. I thought he looked much more imposing than me, as his body was filling out again with our increasing sustenance. Better? I asked the Goliath, who inspected me for a minute. Yes. Do you think she will recognize you? Mavith asked. I thought about it. My helm covered my head fairly well and protected my cheeks, but my eyes, nose, and mouth were visible. She had also recognized me the second time I placed her into my dimensional space. Yes, she might not immediately, but she will eventually. Stand behind me then, until I can explain to her what is happening. Do you know her name? Mavith asked. No, both times we met. She was trying to kill me. I did not have time for introductions. I laughed incredulously, but something tickled my mind. I pulled the elven dagger off my belt. I was wearing the black blade and her elven dagger. I looked at the small script. I did not remember what Scholar Fabian had said the writing was, but I was able to sound it out myself in the elven tongue. Her name might be Rielia Glavian. Mavith nodded, recalling the scholar's deciphering. Are you sure you don't want to go back to the safe room to do this? He asked again. Phantom pain spread through me. I could tolerate a lot of pain, but it was still extremely unpleasant. The ranged attack of the blue lizard would take a lot of work to overcome. We could never kill it if it never came within range of my dimensional space. Also, if the creature shattered the ice and put us in the water, we would be finished. Maybe if the chamber had not locked us inside, I would have had more confidence if we could draw it into the corridor. No, Mavith, I think we will try our luck with the phased spiders. We cleaned up the corridor, but the dungeon had not yet absorbed our bowel movements. It was what it was, and I was going to assume our mess would be the last thing she was concerned with. I did not know how long we could linger in the corridor before the dungeon released the creatures in the rooms to pursue us, but the shapeshifters warned us that the dungeon would eventually pursue us. I stood behind Mavith and told him she was in bad shape. Get the potion into her quickly. It might not even help. I was pretty certain she was dead when I pulled her into my space. Mavith took a deep breath. I am ready. The elf griffin rider appeared on the floor in front of Mavith. He already had the potion moving to pour into her mouth. Her body was a mess. Blood flowed from puncture wounds caused by the drake's bite, and her leather armor and clothes were damaged and soaked with blood. It had not taken a lot of either to take her out, and I could send her back or remove her head if necessary. Mavith was excited. The wounds are closing. It is not going to be enough. I need the other potion. His voice was urgent. It is our last healing potion, Mavith. I could get by without healing potions, but Mavith could not. Maveth held out his hand emphatically. I pulled the potion from my space and handed it to him. He understood the ramifications. The Griffin Rider's wounds closed, and her face went gaunt as the potion did its work. Using her body's minimal reserves, her chest began to rise and fall. Then she inhaled a deep, panicked breath. I guessed her mind had caught up, and was remembering what had happened just before she had been stored in my dimensional space. Search her for weapons and items. Maveth hesitated briefly before removing her belt, which had a few pouches on it. He handed it to me, and he found a knife secreted in her boot. I searched the pouches, finding 3 lesser dungeon healing potions. We had just used 2 greater healing potions on her, so I was taking these as payment and sent them to my dimensional storage. These potions would have been useful when we were back in the library, I lamented. The other pouches contained myconid powder, dark moss, and spools of twine. I looked at Maveth, who was waiting for her to regain consciousness. "Give me the ring." I indicated the bright silver ring the elf wore. Maveth hesitated a moment before removing it and handing it to me. It looked like it could be an artifact, so I sent it to storage. Her eyes began to flutter, and if it was not for her blood-caked face and messy hair, I might have thought she was attractive. Ra'elia Maveth whispered softly and reassuringly, "You are safe now." "I am Maveth." He started to repeat that over and over. What if her name wasn't Ra'elia? Then Maveth would look silly, not me. A groan escaped her lips as she came to and moved slowly. Her crusty eyes began to flutter, and the moment was upon us. I whispered, "Be careful. She has fireball magic," Maveth hissed. "Quiet. Elves have excellent hearing." The Griffin Rider slowly turned her head as her eyes focused. The shimmering lights in the ceiling were probably not the best environment to awaken to. She finally focused on the smiling Maveth, who was lucky I had the mouthwash to whiten his teeth. Otherwise, his dark blue lips and stained teeth would have scared her. She finally spoke weakly and confused. "A Goliath? Where am I?" "You are in a dungeon. I am Maveth, and I will not harm you. You have my word as a member of the Stoneskin clan." Stoneskin clan. Maveth had never told me he was part of a clan. I felt slightly betrayed that he told the elf first. She spoke softly with effort. "Why am I in a dungeon? What happened?" "I was with Veril." She paused to think. "We were running from the accursed Telhian legionnaires." Her body jolted. A drake. I was in a drake's mouth and helpless. She was sitting up, and I could tell her heart was racing with the memories that were just a few moments ago for her. Her hands traveled over her body, feeling her bloody clothes and the holes in her armor. Her voice was slightly clearer. "Maveth, how am I here with you?" "Yeah, Maveth, how is she here with you?" "My friend saved you." He moved aside so she could see me. The elf's eyes had trouble focusing on me as she had not quite gotten accustomed to the shifting and flowing dungeon light. There, I could see it happen. Her eyes started to widen as recognition occurred. She reached for her belt knife. I could not help myself. I pulled her runic dagger. Looking for this, it was an idiotic play to taunt her, especially when she overreacted, and anger flared in her eyes. Maveth tried to calm the situation. "Eric is a good person. He has saved me multiple times. He will not hurt you either." I was smart enough not to debate the point and sheathed the dagger. If necessary, I would end her. "He is a legionnaire, Goliath. Do the world a favor and end him before he kills you." She spat a bloody glob on the floor at my feet. "I do not think this is going to work out, Maveth. I will just put her back for now," I said, thinking the threat would give us some leverage. The elf realized what that meant, rolled to her feet in a flash, and darted into the Phazed spider forest room. "Well, we tried," I said, but Maveth was already rushing after her. "Ra'elia, stop! We are in a dungeon!" Maveth yelled. But the elf girl did not stop. "Fuck!" I swore, drawing the black blade and moving to protect Maveth. The elf reached the center of the room, and 2 Phazed spiders launched from the trees. She managed to roll forward and avoid both. She was sprinting toward an exit we had not been able to see. 2 more of the Phazed spiders zipped through the air behind her back. She could not see them but dodged anyway. Then Mama Spider flashed to the ground, blocking her access to the corridor exit. Maveth had crushed the first 2 spiders that had attacked the elf. I caught movement, and slashed the air, bisecting my own spider. I could not focus on Maveth or the elf girl. The spiders' bodies were the size of cats, but their legs made them seem much larger. I was actually surprised at how easily my black blade cut through them. They were probably just as surprised as they were a blur and thought themselves immune to my attack. I killed a second, then a third, and then snuck a glance at Maveth. He was covered in spider goo. The elf was dodging the horse-sized spider, trying to sneak past it. I got my fourth spider, and Maveth yelled, "We have to help her. She does not have a weapon." I was free of spiders and rushed forward as Maveth crushed another spider with a hammer, splattering spider goo on me as I passed. The elf girl was trying to tear the spider from her back, and the large spider closed in on her. I removed the head of the large spider, feeling modest resistance to my effort, but I was successful. I hacked one of the small spiders on the ground, leaving just the one on her back. Maveth joined me, grabbed the spider's legs on her, and started tearing them off with his bare hands. The elf was wobbling on her feet as the venom took effect. I spun, looking for threats, but just smiled when I noticed the stone chest in the center of the trees. The elf collapsed to the ground, paralyzed. Maveth knelt to check on her. "Relieved," he said. "She is alive, just puncture wounds in the shoulder." "Are you sure the venom is just a paralytic?" I walked over and stood over both of them. "Maveth, I do not think this is going to work out. She is not going to help us." The elf's eyes started darting from me to Maveth and back again. She tried to speak, but it came out garbled. I noted, "Looks like the paralysis doesn't affect her hearing or sight." The griffin rider was paralyzed but could still hear and see us, her eyes darting around in panic at her situation. Maveth was tending to her while I searched the forest room. The trees would have been an ideal harvest for the city above, especially if the room recovered with fully grown trees each time it reset. The branches still had a few mantises, but I was not about to climb the tree to get them. The floor was covered with leafy plants and grass, and the reward chest was in the center of the room. Since Maveth was tending to the elf, I shattered the stone casing. As I searched through the stone and silver coins, I found a large ring resembling a napkin holder. It appeared to be made out of stone, with a soft pink color and considerable weight. There was a relief around the outside depicting elven hunters chasing large elk. The craftsmanship was amazing, and I hoped it was an artifact. I bagged it with the coins for now and would move it to my dimensional space when I had the ether. I turned my attention to the plants. The only thing I recognized as useful was ginseng. Ginseng is used in alchemy, cooking, and teas. If I remembered correctly, the older it is, the more potent. I carefully dug up the first ginseng while waiting for my ether to recover in order to pull out my collector. The ginseng root was huge, over a foot long, and had dozens of rings. This ginseng was incredibly old and therefore probably valuable to the right alchemist. I had time to harvest a second before I could retrieve the collector. I started on the largest spider. Maveth was talking to his captive audience, who garbled words occasionally that I could not make out. I doubted the Goliath would be able to soothe the griffin rider. I had an ether potion ready to drink if she needed to be dealt with. The largest Phazed spider had remained upright, its body frozen in rigor mortis after I took its head. I had to chop the legs to get the body down, as it was 8 feet in the air. Soon, I watched thick wisps of blue smoke being pulled into the collector, and I got excited. The apex essence that formed was something I had not seen before. Inside the essence sphere, little flashes of white jumped around a foggy matrix. I had memorized all the affinities. This was Displacementa rare magic affinity. I quickly harvested all 12 of the small spiders, keeping an eye on Maveth and the elf. I soon added 7 major essences and 5 minor displacement essences. These rare essences were as good as gold outside the Tellian Empire. I stored them all and returned to harvesting the ginseng. Just over an hour after the fight, Maveth said, "She is starting to move." I cleaned the dirt off my hands and walked over to the two. Maveth had bandaged the puncture wounds from the Phazed spider on her shoulder. It made me think, "Maveth, do you think we can harvest some of the venom?" It was pretty effective. I indicated the elf, and she returned my look with a hard stare. Maveth considered, "If it is similar to harvesting snake venom, I can try. Usually, the snakes are alive, though. Maveth stood and took one of the small spiders. While he worked, I looked down at the elf. Her eyes were fixed on me in defiance as her fingers twitched. Maveth announced, "I think it is a different process, or they need to be alive." Nothing came out. A pity. We should cook in here and rest before checking the passage. Maveth nodded eagerly at the prospect of food. I took out the elven tablet reader to use as a prep station, curious about what the Griffin Rider would make of it. I decided to try making a brisket. I rubbed a 7-pound bear roast with salt and pepper and seared all 4 sides before putting it in a pan with the appleberry jam and some water. I used another pan to cover it. The thermal stone was a distance away, making it challenging to control the heat. "That is mine," the elf said in accented Latin. Well, at least she hadn't attacked me. "The knife or the thermal stone?" I replied casually while trying to control the heat. It was hard as I was using Maveth's cooking pot alongside mine. The massive cast-iron cauldron was still full of appleberry jam. The elf struggled to sit up and fold her legs beneath her. Maveth was watching her closely, and I was keeping her within range of my dimensional space. She finally said grumpily, "Both." "Both? Well, you are welcome to carry the stone, but I have to hold onto the knife to make sure you don't stab me in the back," I said dismissively. She ground her teeth a little. "It is a legacy blade. Only those of my line may wield it." Her eyes were angry, but she controlled her speech. "You can hold on to it, but I ask you not to use it." Maveth had been paying rapt attention. "That sounds reasonable, Eric. It was the best blade we had for skinning and preparing meals." I took off the sheath with the dagger and made it disappear. Her eyes widened, but she calmed quickly, realizing I had stored it. I replaced it with another knife from my storage. "Happy?" I asked, but she did not respond, so I focused on the meal. A few minutes later, she started to fish for information. "Where are we?" Maveth told you. "We are in a dungeon." "A dangerous dungeon," I replied calmly. "Which dungeon?" she said, irritation in her voice. "It is called the Shimmering Labyrinth," Maveth supplied, trying to mediate. The elf processed the name. "Never heard of it." "Really? It is in the ruins of Kaelora, an elven city," I said, and her eyes went wide. "We are in the Lost City. Why would you go into the Lost City?" Her surprise at where we were etched fear onto her filthy face. The city seemed to scare her more than being in a dungeon. "The city is not lost and was quite easy to find, actually," I stated sardonically. "Idiot," she said softly in Elvish, but still loud enough for me to hear. She continued in Tellian. "Lost city to the elves. The king of Kaelora refused help from Ezenhem when the Legion was conquering the lands. They thought they could defend themselves and would not send their soldiers to help others. The Elven Council became so incensed they ostracized the king and the city. It was lost to the other elven nations, and then the king of Kaelora cursed his people, always to defend it. The Griffin Rider's information sounded about right. Yeah. I never studied Elven nor Tellian history. I am just a country bumpkin," I said with some indifference. Bumpkin confused both her and Maveth, but the meaning was implied. Maveth stepped in as he sensed our tempers rising. "Eric was conscripted into the Legion. He is not from the Tellian Empire." The elf girl studied me, and I could see her flexing and testing her control over her hands. Was she getting ready for some magic fireballs? I figured 2 air shields would block them easily enough. My jam was bubbling with the roast, so I added a little water. The elf's stomach rumbled at the sweet smell. All the healing had probably drained her body stores. "Where are you from?" she finally asked. "Singa. Small fishing village. Small fishing village. Do not ask about my lighter skin. My parents immigrated there. I had a tough time growing up being so pale. I had lived a little, but I saw pity in her eyes for just a flash. "What did you do to get conscripted?" she asked, sounding interested, and maybe a little more relaxed. She stood and stretched, and we both tensed. She was testing us, I thought. Rape, theft, assault, the usual, but I profess my innocence. "Not that it matters in the Empire," I said irritably, trying to shock her a bit and get her reaction. "I can see it," she said, but I did not know if she was alluding to my crimes or my profession of my innocence. "My name is Raelia, of House Glavian." I think she thought I would be more impressed. She was immediately disappointed that I was not and just nodded slightly. Maveth said you would release me if I helped you escape the dungeon. Maveth's deep voice echoed as he rushed to join the conversation he had been listening to raptly. It would be a fair exchange, Eric. He had not consulted with me on this point. I could not help but laugh. Raelia of House Glavian. We are in the deepest part of a powerful dungeon. Even if we leave, there will be tens of thousands of undead specters who want to kill us. Not to mention that the rest of my company are in this dungeon, and I do not think they are going to be happy to see you, if you know what I mean. There was also the fact that I could not let them see her, as it would reveal how powerful my space affinity was. Then why did you let me out? Why did you imprison me a second time? Her voice quickly rose in volume. I will get out of here on my own. She stormed off toward the Blue Lizard chamber, never even giving me time to reply. Raelia, Maveth said, trying to calm her as she stormed away. I barked harshly at Maveth. Let her go. Maveth stopped hesitantly. When she entered the tunnel out of earshot, I told Maveth, she will be back. She needs to realize we are her only hope. I will tell her she can get out of the dungeon in my dimensional space if we meet others from the company. 15 minutes later, she came storming back into the chamber. There is a frost salamander in that room. Is that what it is called? We were calling it a blizzard lizard, I retorted with a smirk. Maveth was confused. We were. I just came up with it, Maveth. Help a guy out here or the delivery does not work, I begged, trying to sound funny. Maveth nodded. Yes, we named it the Blizzard Lizard. Extremely dangerous, and you should not attempt to kill it alone. Eric almost died when he did. Maveth advised the elf sagely. You killed the frost salamander yourself, she asked in disbelief, looking at me. Blizzard Lizard. But yes. I waved my hand dismissively. Maybe I was trying to impress the elf a little. She didn't need to know how close I had been to death. The griffin rider mumbled worriedly. Phase spiders and frost salamanders. What is down that corridor? We haven't explored it yet, Maveth answered her. Her despair at figuring out how trapped she currently was made me feel some pity for her. She collapsed and sat cross-legged, and I could see her flesh through all the holes in her armor and clothes from the drake. I blushed when she caught me staring. I pulled out the cloak we got from the cockatrice room and tossed it to her. She caught it, and her eyes went wide. Anger laced her voice. Who did you kill to obtain this? And what happened to Veril? It was a reward in the cockatrice chamber. Veril is dead. I knew Veril was the summoner's apprentice she had been with, probably protecting. That news seemed to hit her hard. She muttered, cockatrices, and Veril's name a few times to herself, but did not address us for a good while as she processed. She eventually put the cloak on to cover herself, and it shimmered to blend into the ground, giving her modest camouflage in the open. I should have realized the item was an artifact. You can just borrow that, I grumbled. She pulled the cloak around herself. It is a ranger's cloak. The methodology to artifice one was lost well. It was lost when Kaelora fell, as they were the only elven crafters who could make them. My people highly prized them. Maveth seemed to think of something. Maybe the crafters in the city did not make them, and the ranger's cloaks were found in the dungeon. Perhaps, Maveth? I produced her backpack and tossed it to her. It had her spare clothes. How large is your space? She asked, some amazement entering her voice. She started going through her bag, but I was certain there was nothing dangerous in there. I am not telling you, I said flatly. She huffed and went behind a tree to change into underclothes that had no holes. She walked back to us and approached more confidently. The thermal stone and steaming brisket were on the ground, and the elven tablet reader was covered in items I used to prepare the meal. What are you doing? Raelia exclaimed, seeing the table clearly for the first time. That is an assessment table. You cannot use it to prepare lunch. Are they valuable? We found it in Kaelora, I asked nonchalantly, holding back a grin. You can find them in Adventurers' Guild halls, but this one is elven-made, unless... She dropped to the ground, and I stepped back on alert. She moved under the table, inspecting it. Disappointing. It is just a copy of the Tellian assessment tablet. She stood and inhaled the stewing meat, her stomach rumbling loud enough for me to hear. What does that mean? Copy? Maveth asked. The First Legion was the first to make readers 2,000 years ago. All the artificers who made them keyed them to human physiology, she said with some loathing. See, she growled, with some loathing. And others copied the artifact, but it wasn't until about 1,000 years ago that dwarves and other races started artificing assessment tablets that were keyed to other races. How old are you? I asked, perplexed. She could pass for a human woman in her late teens or early 20s. Her eyes narrowed at the question, but she answered, 47. Maveth offered unhelpfully. Elves live much longer than humans, Eric. She just looks young by human standards. Thanks, Maveth. I tested the brisket, and it still needed an hour or two. I am going to harvest the rest of the ginseng. Maveth, can you watch the pot in my back while I am doing it? Dungeon ginseng. That is exceedingly rare. Give me a knife, and I will assist. I was not willing to give her any weapon yet. I will be fine on my own, I said, dismissing her offer. I left the two talking and went to harvest the ginseng. I even got lucky when one of the mantises fell from a tree. I quickly restrained it and used the collector to get a minor essence of coordination. You have a collector too. Relia barked from across the chamber. She must not have been able to see me using it while she was paralyzed. I groaned as Maveth showed off his bag of minor quickness essences to her on the other side of the chamber. I was not sharing my essences with the elf. I dug for a few hours when Maveth finally called me over for the meal. He had added a lot of pepper to give it some spice. The sweet shredded BBQ brisket was probably the best thing we had in the dungeon so far. The elf probably ate 3 pounds of it and even scraped every bit of jam left in the pan. I could not blame her. After all her healing, she needed the calories. How much time left, Maveth? The elf was holding her belly and perked up at the question. Maveth patiently explained to her. We decided to only remain in a room for half a day to make sure the creatures do not respawn on top of us. Why? Don't you know how a dungeon works? Relia asked, perplexed. You do? I asked, suddenly interested in what the elf had to say. Yes. I have been in the Nameless Swamp and Whispering Woods as part of my training. Maveth and I looked at each other. Maybe the elf would be useful after all. I could not help but laugh when Maveth asked, confused. If it is called the Nameless Swamp, doesn't it have a name then?